Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt and Operator Starsky. Say hello, Enforcer Matt.
And hello everybody, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 201 of the news, and Operator Starsky is in the building.
Operator Starsky is in the house with us tonight as we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we're also running a fundraiser. However, he will not be talking for about the first 30 minutes or so because he literally just got up, so he's trying to get some coffee, but we got him on, and we're running a fundraiser tonight for none other than Razom for Ukraine. Razom for Ukraine is an incredible nonprofit organization that has been helping out Ukrainian veterans for quite some while. They provide things like college scholarships and benefits to these soldiers who have served Ukraine so bravely and heroically. Of course, our goal is raised tonight at $10,000. And of course, I have to make sure to keep up my end of the deal because I have done this every single fundraiser we've had, which we've had about, I think, 26 of them at this point. But let me make sure to throw in my $100 to the fundraiser because that is always my stamp of approval. And also, if y'all would like to, try and match me because $100 is a pretty good bit. It's not the biggest we ever get because, of course, we've had like, what, a $10,000 donation one time, Matthew, I think?
Yes, I think so.
So we've had some pretty high ones, but this is still a pretty good starting stone. So if you would like to match me, make sure to match me. So real quick, let me throw this in. It should pop up in the chat while I'm saying this, most likely. So give me just a second, and bling, there we go. It should be popping up in the chat right about now. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into the news as the Ukrainian counterattacks are still moving with the same speed and ferocity that they have been for the past few days. In fact, we're going to start off with some news that is shocking. It's actually unbelievable. Today, partisans within the city of Kremina, just northwest of by a few miles of Rubizhny, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk, which only a month and a half ago were major battlegrounds that the Ukrainians and Russians were fighting over, had partisans raise the Ukrainian flag over the town, and the Russians ran away. So the Ukrainians technically control this area of the country now, and although we were not able to get video or picture evidence of it, considering they're partisans, we lifted that standard for this one single moment because we saw that the Kyiv Independent reported that the town of Kremina in the Luhansk Oblast has been liberated by partisans. Now, if that doesn't tell you how bad of a state the Russian military is in, I don't know what else will, considering that they're running from armed civilians at this point, and they're not true military forces with the high tech and equipment that the Ukrainians have been able to, I guess you could say, cultivate over these past few months. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this area, which that's pretty nice to see, and also it takes a little bit of pressure off of Lehman, and we're now going to be moving further out the front towards the area of Izyum, because nothing has stopped here either today. Starting off, we've seen that a Russian Su-25, two of them, were trying to avoid some Igla/Stingers that were fired at them earlier today, but it looks like they were only able to miss one, and another one exploded by proxy near the aircraft and caused a decent amount of damage. So here's the video. We can see the Su-25s in flight. Let me unmute this real quick. Actually, it's got music. But we can see that the Su-25s are taking a hard left turn, popping off their chaff and flares. And when you see the front pilot right up there near the top of the screen, they're still taking that hard turn over the pot-marked landscape. And the Ukrainians, of course, are not going to let these Su-25s fly freely. Right now, somewhere in the distance, there is an Igla or a Stinger that is spooling up and aiming right at these Su-25s with the intent of taking them down. We can see that first Igla scrape right by the nose cone of this Su-25, just a couple of yards in front of it right there. And you can see the Stinger missile continuing to fly outwards as that one unfortunately missed. We can now see the Su-25 continuing to fly, and we can now see the pilot's head movements are a little bit more panicked. Also, I would like to take a quick little note here that this Stinger was quite a whopper. It, of course, went right under the nose cone of the pilot's camera that we can see right here, and it flew for the other Su-25, blowing up directly behind it, as we can see in the film. Right there. You can see the explosion and the other Su-25 in front of him. And now we can see this Su-25 doing a hard roll in a way, well, really just a wing wiggle. And we can also see, oh, buddy, there's a little bit of either fuel, coolant, or other or hydraulic fluid coming out of the back of the Su-25, letting us know that it has been damaged. This pilot continues to fly alongside him, and that's the end of the video. And it's great to see that Ukrainian air defense forces on the ground with simple manpads are still doing their best to try and shoot down Russian aircraft and inflicting damage on them wherever they can, like we saw in this video. And so with that, we're now going to be moving further to the front line because the Russians are always trying to make sure to spin their story the right way. We all know that the Russians are just steamrolling the Ukrainians right now, and that's why we can see that they have given up so much ground as a sign of goodwill. They're wanting the Ukrainians to at least have a fair chance. And so we can see that today, a Ka-52 supposedly, according to the caption put on this post, counterattacks Ukrainian troops. Although, is this more of a counterattack or covering a route? I would say it's more so covering a route. But here's the video. When you see the Ka-52 firing, then ducking for the tree line. When you see a second Ka-52 firing. And you know, I just hate to say it, y'all, because I always, you know, Russians are trustworthy people. We all know that. I mean, they've never lied during this war, but one thing I gotta say is that I just don't really think this is true anymore. I don't think they're counterattacking Ukrainian forces. I think they might be in a little bit of trouble, but who do I know? And what do I know anyways? I mean, it's not like they've been losing massive amounts of ground about twice the size of the state of Delaware over the past 4 days or anything, but we'll just leave it at that. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of footage, which we got 2 pieces of film from Izyum today. Of course, Izyum was taken just yesterday, pretty much the entirety of the city, and the Russians leaving in such a confused and discombobulated route that they left behind a massive amount of equipment and vehicles. But today we can see that the flag has been raised in the center of Izyum, another symbolic sign of the Ukrainians showing that they will never be defeated, and the Ukrainians have now liberated Izyum. Hey, I like that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And with that, Ukrainian flags now fly over the center of Izyum. The town has been liberated from the Russians. It's been 6 months coming nearly in the Izyum area. Izyum was one of the first towns captured in the war, but we can see now that it has been one of the first liberated in this recent counterattack. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our second video from Izyum, where we can then see the Pikachu soldier. I've never seen this guy before, but apparently he's a bit of a celebrity, and we can see that apparently the Pikachu soldier is now in Izyum, in the same area where that flag was raised. And so here's the video.
Головна площа Ізюма ще догорає.
Also, notice the Ukrainian flag flying on the rooftop. Very nice.
Приміщення місцевої адміністрації. Навколо все зруйновано, але нічого. Все відновимо. А Ізюм був, є і буде Україна. І все буде Україна. Вірте в ЗСУ.
Why in the world did that sound? That sounded like a voice from heaven. You know, the guy's just talking here, echoing in the distance, Slava Ukraini, Heroam Slava. But anyways,
He looked concerned for a minute. He was like, who's that over in the distance?
Yeah, let's watch that again. That was actually a pretty funny little moment.
Є і буде Україна. І все буде Україна. Вірте в ЗСУ. Україна! Путін! Отак місцеві зустрічають.
And I love it. And it's great to see that apparently there's some kind of non-corporeal voice floating around Izyum just yelling out, Slava Ukraini! But with that, all past all the jokes, it is a beautiful sight to see that Ukrainian forces are now rolling through the major city of Izyum. It has been a linchpin point on this area of the Eastern Front for months at this time. And to see that Ukrainian forces have not only liberated this city, but have pushed far beyond it as far as we know, is impressive and something that should be put down in the history books for all time. This counterattack has to be, as far as I can recall, the most upsetting counterattack that has occurred within the past 50 years of war. It was entirely unexpected. No one saw it coming, but yet it happened, and they're doing far better than anyone could ever even imagine. With that, we're now going to be moving further north to a small village called Buhivka, where we saw that some Ukrainian citizens were greeting the liberators as they walked through their town and on to the next. And they looked pretty happy. You don't see this in Russian propaganda films much.
От так на Харківщині зустрічають Збройні Сили України наші прекрасні місцеві мешканці.
And look at the smiles on all their faces. If you go back and look at Russian propaganda footage of them supposedly liberating villages and forcing people out of basements to stand around in front of a camera, you wouldn't see any smiles. You wouldn't see people volunteering their own words and celebrations. You wouldn't see any of that because those people were forced into that situation. But when the Ukrainian army comes rolling through your village, like this one, these people are truly elated to see that they will no longer have to live under Russian tyranny and their lands are now Ukrainian once again. It's a very nice thing to see.
Принесли нам їсти, героям слава. Це
And they've also brought gifts of food.
Село Бугаївка.
За це слід боротися, за цих людей.
Ми вас дуже чекали, дуже-дуже чекали.
Все тепер буде добре, все.
Дякуємо вам.
Вам дякуємо.
With that, that's the end of the video, and it's beautiful to see that the Ukrainians have liberated so many villages, and we've seen so many videos of people truly happy to know that they will no longer have to live under the tyranny of the Russians. With that, we're now going to be moving even further north to a village called Staroverivka. This marker is somewhere in this area. It's within one of these villages, but we weren't really able to pinpoint which one. So the marker is not entirely accurate, but we can see more happy tears being shed by Ukrainian citizens as they have now been liberated once more in this area. You see a Ukrainian soldier holding a Ukrainian flag being embraced by a citizen who is crying tears of joy as the army walks on by. It's incredible to see. We've seen so many tears shed over this war, and most of the times not over good things. It's always been Ukrainian tears shed over merciless Russian attacks killing civilians, and now for the first time in this war we are seeing Ukrainians shed tears of joy for their liberation and not the attacks that the Russians have been propagating against their land for so long. With that, we're now going to be moving on out of this video. Once again, another nice one. And we're going to be moving towards the town of Kupiansk. Now, Kupiansk was not mentioned a lot in this war, but a lot of people have known that it is a hub due to its position on two major highways, the P-79 and the P-07, as a supply hub for the Russian forces in this area. The Ukrainians, of course, pushed through the town the other day, but of course, it's always the day after, as y'all can see, that the Ukrainians raise the flag over the city and symbolically show that it is now theirs again. And here we can see that the Ukrainians raised the flag over Kupiansk, once again liberating the third major city in this area. Here's the video of them raising the flag. And with that flag touching the top of the flagpole, it's become known to the world once again that the Ukrainians are not to be messed with and that they've liberated the major supply hub of Kupiansk. With that, we're now going to be moving into our second video from the area of Kupiansk, where we can see some Ukrainians having some fun times. Most specifically, they're having a fun time laughing at Russian provisions. That sounds like copyrighted music. We can see a Ukrainian SPG passing by. See them. Oh, look. Hey, look at that, Matthew. Free grenade right there.
Oh, wow. Pick that up for sure.
Quick, grab it. Or else the Russians might try and come back and use it for a ghetto bomb. See the Ukrainians just observing the squalor that the Russians have been living in. And now, of course, a lot of Ukrainians have had the opportunity to do unboxing videos in this war. There's been a lot of content, if you'll see what I'm saying. And so a lot of Ukrainian soldiers have started to get into the unboxing section of YouTube videos. And it looks like we're about to watch the Ukrainians start a brand new unboxing channel. I wish them the best of luck. And if these guys do have a channel out there, I highly suggest you subscribe to them. But we see here a box with a Russian cap on top. And look at this. That must be a luxury in Russia. They got paper towels.
I thought there was going to be fish in the box or something.
Yeah, I thought it'd be some... what in the world is that? Germex. Because Germex is very important on the front lines.
Oh, yeah. That's going to help.
That's going to help them. You know, after they get a whole bunch of cuts and bruises from a Ukrainian mortar shelling, it's always good to put some nice burning hot Germex all over your open wounds. We now see him pulling out some baby wipes. Of course, they'll need those to clean off their pants after they change the Russian flag's colors from white, blue, and red and into a nice brown. We can also see that they got a toothbrush. They've gotten some... What in the world? Is that flour?
Or I think it might be, or bread, maybe?
Nah, it's not bread. It looks like flour. Let's see. Muka...
Guys, it's a flower actually.
Okay, it's
Hey!
hey, he's here.
Hey,
Starsky,
hi everyone.
Starsky could not handle us looking at this bag of flour and guessing what it is. He's like, guys, it's flour. Just grow up. So when you see him showing off the flour, now let me ask you this, Starsky: have you ever had this brand of flour, and is it a high quality flour or not?
It's not Ukrainian flour. It's a Russian flour from Lipetsk, from what I see. Yeah, it says that it's a higher sort of flour.
Interesting. Higher grade in Russia means about average quality in Ukraine, probably. So they put that down, and they now pull out some noodles, and then pull out some. I can't even tell you what those are. They look like muffins or bagels.
Yeah, those are called bubliki in Russian, like snacks.
Ah, all right. And we also got some tea to go along with the snacks. I'm not really a big tea person. I drink straight up caffeine that they call coffee. When you see that they got a can of something, yeast maybe? That it looks like a yeast packet, kind of.
Yeah, that's yeast.
And then he puts that down. Can't even tell you what. Go ahead, Starsky.
That was the salt. This is obviously sugar, and that's the oil. The toothbrush, the toothpaste, and the brush.
Ah, yes, because Russian hygiene is, of course, important. When you're crapping your pants all day, you got to stay clean.
Oh yeah.
And so with that, that's the end of that video. And of course, great to see the Ukrainians conducting another unboxing video in the area of Kupiansk. With that, we're now going to be moving a little bit east, in a way, across the Oskil River Reservoir, where we can see that a Russian BMP-2 took a wrong turn and ended up driving straight into Ukrainian armed forces. So without further ado, here's the video. This one's actually pretty interesting. This footage was taken from on top of a Ukrainian BMP, and we can see down the road, there's the silhouette of a Russian APC. Firing at it from a pretty close range. And I see the Ukrainian looking over the top of his hatch again. We can hear the Ukrainians firing at the vehicle once more. We can also see some dust being snapped up on the side of the road, most likely from ricochets or bullets being fired in their direction. They continue to fire. The BMP is now motionless down there and has been sitting at the end of the road, really doing nothing. We now hear the engine getting a little bit louder again. fire continues. And I can't... Yeah! And I can't even tell you what that was right there. I feel like it may be some kind of a smoke grenade, but at the same time, I'm highly skeptical about that. So, fortunately, I can't tell you what that is. Because it's not really smoky. But we could tell it was fired from the Ukrainian side.
So to me, it looks like an RPG rocket. When you shoot it, it uses that powder charge, and then the grenade activates. I mean that jet engine inside the grenade, solid jet engine.
Oh.
So that looks like an RPG shot.
All right, so Operator Starsky once again pulling in clutch and helping us to describe what that was. We hear the Ukrainians honk a horn, and now the BMP is starting to back up. We can see some soldiers further up the road. Tank's making a couple of turns as it continues to reverse down the road. Ukrainian soldiers following along with the BMP as it continues to back down the road. You now see the videos cut. And we now see that they are looking through some sleeping Russians, and unfortunately, I cannot show that on YouTube because YouTube is not a big fan of Russians sleeping on the job, and of course we know that that's against Russian company policy, and if they were saw sleeping on the job, I think they might get in a little bit of trouble. They might get fired. So we want to make sure to respect them, at least not get them in too much trouble. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next video, where we can see the Ukrainians conducting more attacks in eastern Ukraine. Also, we're going to mute that for a second, actually. Yep, we're going to mute that. That's some heavy metal. You see the Ukrainians looking down at a Stugna monitor, and as soon as they did, it slammed into a tank. We can now see another bit of footage showing a drone hovering right over a Russian main battle tank, and hitting it dead on top of the turret. We can also see what appears to be a crew member in the about 4 pixels that the screen's sharing running off. We now see a Ukrainian riding on the back of a truck and a ATGM firing off into the distance.
And did you notice the AR-15?
I did.
On his knees?
It looked nice too, like this one right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it looks pretty nice. I like the vertical foregrip. Matthew actually has one like it. It's a little bit shorter though, but I love the longer vertical foregrips.
That's like the old-fashioned broomstick type.
Yeah, I love those. I don't know if you've had any experience with them, Starsky, but are you a fan of shorter vertical foregrips or longer ones?
I use like the classic one.
Ah, the classic. Nice, nice. You and me are both a classic foregrip appreciator. We now see the Ukrainians taking a look at this drone as they continue to drop bomblets onto the Russians, but unfortunately, due to these low amount of pixels we have, we cannot see exactly what they're... Well, we probably are about to see what they're... We can hardly see. I couldn't really tell you what that was, but it looked like they may have hit it dead on. We now see fires breaking out in the underbrush. And the Ukrainians attacking Russian positions. Once again, I bet you've noticed this a lot, Starsky, throughout the war. The Russians read the manual of digging straight trenches. Every single trench they dig is perfectly straight. It's really sad, honestly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's also It's also a poor idea because if you read any World War I trench digging manuals, you know, where trench warfare really came to be, trenches were, well, at least in the manuals, it was ordered that trenches should be built in zigzags. So that way, if an artillery shell lands in the center, the shrapnel doesn't travel down the entire length from end to end, taking out everyone in between. So it looks like the Russians never really got a hold of manuals talking about proper trench digging, because every single time we see them, they're always built in almost perfectly straight lines.
You see, the problem is that Russians usually stick to field manuals, and it's like from what we saw, they follow field manuals like usually, okay, and they always do their trenches like in zigzags. So from what I see, I can make a conclusion that it's either made by those mobilized on the Donbass or by any man without experience. Probably like there were just NCOs at most, and they literally hadn't like no officer in command.
Interesting. That's actually some interesting observations right there that I never considered. And also, on top, I bet you, so far we've seen on video evidence of Russian trenches, almost all of them are dug like this. We've only seen an exception about 3 times out of hundreds of videos in this war showing a Russian trench. And so a lot of them must be like, the manual says to dig a hole in the ground in a straight line, so we're doing it right. You now see the Ukrainians dropping more bomblets onto an APC down below. Also, the Ukrainians driving through what appear to have been a somewhat destroyed village. Once again, firing ATGMs. We can also see... Well, actually, that's not an AT... That's a Stugna. And we can see that they made themselves a nice little setup where they can operate the Stugna from under the berm. With that, it looks like they got another hit.
This is what they usually do because you can operate Stugna remotely through wires. So they usually use Stugna for like observation while being hidden on the ground.
And I gotta say, it's an impressive weapon system from what we've seen over the course of this war so far with that kind of ability, especially in defensive positions, because the crew isn't even in any kind of danger if for some reason the tank, that they're looking at gets lased or anything like that. They never have to put themselves in jeopardy. And I think that was a really smart weapons design by the Ukrainians for that reason. It was really ahead of its time back in 2017. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of this area and further north into our 2 last bits of news before we get to addressing the fundraiser, because it is going ballistic tonight, and also addressing 3 questions from the chat. And so moving on towards the village of Andriivka, we can see more prisoners of war in the Kharkiv region. And so, without further ado, here's that video. And there's a lot of them. So let's count them up. Just in case if y'all have never seen Sesame Street, they usually count in up to around 10. So let's see if we can count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6. By and large, pretty good. 7, 8. They've got 8 of them. Look at that. A nice even number. And that's the end of that video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainian advance is moving at such a blistering speed that they're able to overrun Russian forces to the point that almost an entire infantry squad surrenders intact. That's something that you only see when you're steamrolling an enemy force, and it looks like the Ukrainians have been doing an incredible job at it. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to our last bit of news before we move into this first question segment, where we can see the Ukrainians clearing abandoned positions in a somewhat unorthodox but incredibly cool way. What we're about to see here is the Ukrainians using a 4-wheeler, and a lot of people in the United States and around the world may be familiar with a 4-wheeler, and they also have a trailer attached to it. They're going to drive the 4-wheeler by abandoned Russian positions and shoot into them to clear them. So with that, here's the video. Also, we gotta mute it because of copyrighted music. When we see the Ukrainian firing into the positions, and I gotta say, this is
That is so cool.
I think the Ukrainians and people in the South have something in common, because this is what I imagine people down here doing too.
That's some rednecking activities right there.
It is, and I gotta appreciate it as a Southerner. It makes the Southern in me proud. We can also see a bushfire happening. We can now see some sped up footage of the Ukrainians moving along in the ATV and inspecting the damage that's been caused to the area. Now see them showing off some craters, and that's the end of the video. Once again, pretty cool to see the Ukrainians using some unorthodox methods of clearing like that, but still, a really cool nonetheless, and a huge credit to the bravery of the Ukrainian soldiers like Starsky, who continue to push back the Russians each and every day. And so with that, we have now reached the end of this first news segment. So we're going to take a quick moment to address our fundraiser, which is looking unbelievable right now. And we're also going to address 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the next segment of news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, and up first for our first question segment of the stream, we are sitting at 5.7 thousand of our $10,000 goal on that fundraiser. And again, tonight's charity is Razom, so to help the soldiers of Ukraine. So very, very good progress. We're only 30 minutes into the stream, so tremendously great. And Enforcer, we do have one poll to go over before I recognize our top donors of the night. When you are ready.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, and that poll said, should Putin be concerned that his reign might be coming to an end very soon? 57% said yes, it is near. 35% said maybe, let's wait and see. And only 8% said no, he will remain. Now for me, if this war keeps going the way it's going and Russia is defeated, I can't imagine that Putin would end up staying. It seems very improbable in my opinion. But Enforcer and also Starsky, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll actually let Starsky go first on that one.
I think it was one of the main Putin's concern since the 2000s, probably. And in my opinion, his reign will be finished very, very soon as we are victorious. I have no doubt in that. But of course, he will put all his efforts into, repressing people and not letting it happen. So we can expect some kind of bloodbath in case it happens.
Well, to address the poll on my end, I think he may actually be in a pretty decent amount of trouble here, because from what we've heard, although I haven't been able to confirm it with video and picture evidence, I've heard that there has been some riots in Moscow as of late, but unfortunately I haven't got any video evidence to confirm it, so right now it's more of a kind of like a rumor than fact. But still, considering that 55,000, just around there at this point, Russian soldiers have been killed, and now even on Russian state TV, they're starting to say that things are going terribly for the Russians in the area. I just think that Putin may be in jeopardy of losing his position, or at least having to fight for it, or maybe, going and having a nap with the rest of the Russians. I'm not entirely sure, but still, to address the poll on my end, I would have to agree with the majority of y'all that Putin is probably in some hot water at this point in the war. So with that, now that we've addressed that poll, let's hear about the question segment.
Well, actually, first, we must go over our top donors for the moment. And real quick, they are rolling in like crazy. So let me catch up just a little bit here so I don't miss anybody. Let's see here, 50 from trolling them softly. Alrighty, folks, tonight has been another crazy night for me. The chat, even though on slow mode, is still going 100 miles an hour. But that is a good problem to have on fundraiser night. That means we are reaching our goal extremely fast. And we are now up to 6.6 thousand on the fundraiser. So we are moving up incredibly fast. So first up from our top donors, we have a $2,000 donation from Smell Me Fingers, who doesn't donate to tonight's fundraiser for Razom because he is in Australia and he can't do so, but he donates to United 24. So very good on the initiative aspect there. Smell Me Fingers always comes through every single Sunday, and we thank him very much for finding an alternative way to donate to Ukraine.
And also, real quick, just to our Australian and New Zealand viewers, y'all cannot fundraise on these fundraisers because of YouTube's weird rules and also Australian and New Zealand laws. For some reason, it doesn't allow for y'all to support fundraisers that are through the YouTube Give platform. However, you can support United 24. Anyone in the world can support United 24, and all of that fundraising goes directly to the government of Ukraine. It's incredibly safe, so of course, I support it 100%. And so if you are from Australia or New Zealand, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to contribute to the goal on tonight's fundraiser, but you will be able to contribute to Ukraine in a way if you support United 24. And so if you cannot help the fundraiser goal here tonight, make sure to hop over to United 24 and help them out. And also, I just remembered real quick, Matthew, I have to throw in a second amount of fundraising because I remember that that we actually had some notes that I just saw pop up on my phone just like 10 minutes ago that we were supposed to add in an additional amount to the normal $100 I threw in. So real quick, everyone, give me just a second. You'll probably see it pop up in the chat. I'll be throwing in about another $75. So give me just a second. Let me see here. Other 75 done, and then continue. 1 second, everyone. I'm sorry. I know this is kind of a little boring, but I want to make sure to keep up obligations to people that requested this. And so 75, and there we go.
Hey, look, I'm glad you're taking a break for a minute because I'm trying to catch up myself.
And Starsky's over there. He's probably glad that we have about an extra minute or two because once again, he just woke up. Like I actually called him before the stream. I was like, "Hey man, what's up?" And he was like, "Oh man, I just woke up." And I was like, "Come on, man, get on here." So I bet you he's probably trying to get up too still. But you know, we've got a syringe of adrenaline here at our house, so if we have to, we'll just mail it first class over to Ukraine, and hopefully he can get himself up and ready to go. But with that, y'all should see another $75 in the chat, and oh my God,
whoa, $1,000 from Dutch
just threw in
Argent coming through.
$1,000. $1,000 freaking dollars. That brought us up to $8.1 thousand on the fundraiser, and we are now only $1.9 thousand away from 10,000. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next question. And thank you so much once again, Trolling Them Softly, for taking on the initiative. And I'm glad that you have such a big heart and are willing to help out Ukraine any way you can, even when YouTube busts your kneecaps out, because they like to do that to a lot of people, and doesn't allow you to support our fundraiser. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And guess what, folks? We're still in our top donors segment. So we did recognize that $1,000 donation from Dutch Argent. Big thanks to you for that very generous donation. We also have a $500 donation from DCC Prime 1 and a $350 donation from Rhett Gustafsson, along with a $200 donation from Slava Ukraine. So big thanks to you three as well for that extremely generous support. And moving right along, we have a $111 donation from Mark Clinton. And then, bear with me, we have a lot of $100 donations. We have one from James Reyes, Kaltenberg, Malachite, Compound David, WL, Michael Kompanetz, Susan G, EFF, Michael Stackpole, Flowers, Charles Brown, and also we have an $80 super, I knew I was going to do it. I meant a donation, $80 donation from NBD. Then we have several $50 donations, and here goes my auctioneer imitation right quick. We have a $50 donation from Heather Fitzgibbon, George, New York's premier contractor, Shannon Alaminsky, first and last, Greg Carrier, Bubba Hotep, H2O, Barry Matt, along with Dad Good, Scott Bird, Wookie CS, Cody 1984, RDY4, THDLL, NOYDB, Rob Bertram, Richard Bell, Trister1, Cindy Mitchell, Teresa Bass, Trolling Them Softly, Taras Shevchenko, Rika Marrero, Maldita Viejero, Phil Christmas, RC, and that is it, folks. And thank you for bearing with me on that one. That was a lot to read off. But hopefully I haven't missed any. And a big thanks to all of you. We are up to 8.4 thousand on the fundraiser. Let's get a big yeehaw!
Yeah! And I wonder this, Starsky, are you willing to do a yeehaw?
I doubt that it will be as good as, as Matt does it, actually.
Starsky's like, that man's crazy over there.
And what did you say right then, Starsky? I couldn't hear you over Matthew.
All the glory goes to Matt, so
Oh man, I was seeing if we could get everyone in on this yeehaw in action. We actually saw, surprisingly enough, Starsky, a couple of days ago, we saw a Ukrainian on the Zaporizhia highway after Su-25s flew over him. He yelled out yeehaw in the exact same way. It was weird. It was legitimately insane, and we were like, what in the hell? And I was just wondering, is yeehaw a common phrase in Ukraine?
It's not. It's completely not a common phrase. And by the way, regarding this, so Russian propagandists massively claim that Ukrainian armed forces are being supported by NATO forces. For example, they were saying in Telegram a lot that armies of NATO took Vovchansk and Kazachalopan. So they can use that video with the Su-25 as as an evidence of NATO presence in Ukraine.
They're like, look, there's a yeehaw. It's got to be a Westerner. Well, with that in mind, now knowing that guy either is a huge fan of American cowboys, or you heard Enforcer Matt say it on stream, we're now going to move into the question segment and answer 3 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And first up, Enforcer, before we move into our official first question, I'm seeing a lot of people asking once more, could you please describe what Razom is and what they do to help?
Razom for Ukraine is an organization that provides support to Ukrainian soldiers after they get out of the military. Of course, so let me explain this real quick, because I'm sure someone's about to throw in a better idea, like why not support Come Back Alive? We only run fundraisers through the YouTube Give platform, which then only allows us to run fundraisers that are registered under GuideStar, which GuideStar is pretty much YouTube's system for verifying safe fundraisers, and unfortunately they don't allow, even if they are safe fundraisers, nonprofits that provide materials directly for war. And so unfortunately we couldn't do a fundraiser like that. This is the closest we can get to actually supporting Ukrainian soldiers, but let me explain how it helps them. Much like the United States has a GI Bill, there are benefits that Ukrainian soldiers do get after their service. However, Razom steps in and helps out even double over and makes sure to give out things like full paid college tuition to Ukrainian soldiers that served in the military, among many other kinds of benefits. I would actually, real quick, let's just pull up their website, Razom for Ukraine, and I'll show you all exactly everything they do. So with that, let's go here. About us, projects. Let's go to the projects real quick. We can see they do emergency response. They help out kids. They also give veterans stipends. And they also help out in many other ways. You can see all the projects they have right here, and we can also see that they're trying to lobby for Ukraine in the United States. And so they do a lot of good, and a decent amount of it, the one that I harp on the most, is the veteran stipend, because that helps out Ukrainian soldiers directly. And so they are an incredible organization, and considering that there is a massive counterattack that's been going on right now that has covered unbelievable amounts of ground. Keep in mind, this area here, in the darker gray, or the black, is almost twice the size of the state of Delaware at this point. And if y'all don't know where Delaware is, just in case for y'all are international viewers, Delaware is this state in the United States. And this area that the Ukrainians have captured is almost twice the size. So that's why I back up Razom for Ukraine, because they're an incredible organization that helps out soldiers, and also they've done incredibly well. And considering that this counterattack's been going on, and these soldiers are ending this war incredibly soon, I feel like we ought to have a little, I guess you could say, treasury pretty much, for them to pull out of, so that way once they return to normal life as a citizen, they can make sure to pretty much, I guess you could say, experience the full benefits of what they really fought for. So that's why we're running this fundraiser for Razom. And while I was saying that, we are only $500 away now from $10,000. And that means here soon we're going to have to ask the question, should we raise the goal or not? And so with that, we're now moving on to the next question. I hope that answered that one fairly well.
And real quick, Enforcer, we're moving so fast, I'm going to go ahead and call off our next round of top donors, because I think we're going to reach that $400 more figure in just a moment. So up first, we have a $100 super chat from Maria Wolanski, a $100 super chat from Robert Harrington, along with Zyper Sniper 1 and Lance Kaufman, as well as several more $50 donations. We have one from Amanda Kamla, John Webster, Axel K, Larry Thumper, and Rust and Rot. We also just got a 50 from Fancy Dancer. So thank you very much for your generosity in that. And I think that is all for the moment. So we are only $400 away, folks. I have a feeling we're going to reach that probably before 11 Eastern. So really good progress there. So let's go ahead and move on to our first official question. We're still in the first question segment, believe it or not. And the first one goes to James Reyes, who says, do you believe that Russia caused the traffic jam on purpose on the Kerch Bridge to keep the Ukrainians from taking it out before the offensive started?
I actually did not hear of a traffic jam on the Kerch Bridge, and from what we could confirm, the Ukrainians were able to knock out the Kerch Bridge entirely from use, and then also knocked out the ferry crossing the river as well, as we were able to confirm that not only through an official report, but also on film later on, as we saw HIMARS fire directly hitting the ferry and the Russian soldiers on board at that time. So, as far as I know, the Kerch Bridge was already knocked out before there was a traffic jam, and the Ukrainians had practically knocked that out as the first bridge destroyed, at least effectively, in the entire area before the counterattacks even began. And so I hope that answers the question in a way, and with that, we are on to the next one.
We hit the goal!
Hey,
Yes,
let's go! $10,000! Throw up a poll right now, Matthew. Should we raise it to $20,000 or not?
Okay, and that poll is going up. Not trying to take away from the, oh, dang, no. Let me get that poll down.
Nothing, yes or no. Quick, Starsky, yes or no?
I screwed up Starsky.
Starsky's like, what the hell's the option? So Starsky, the option is ambiguous, but you either say yes or no to it.
I think why not?
Why not? We got it from Starsky. Let's see when Matthew throws up a poll again with an actual question in it. If y'all all agree it should go to 20,000. Someone just actually called for 50,000. And Matthew's still trying to work on the poll. The chat's going a million miles an hour. So that's why we haven't.
And Enforcer, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to that because I'm backed up tremendously with the super chats and also live chat questions. So I think we're just going to have to raise it automatically.
1 second, I got it. 20,000, yes or no? I'll throw that up real quick. Let's see what we get. We're going to run that for just literally like 30 seconds. And once we get the yes, because I know we will, we're going to bump it up and then keep going. So let's give it a second. Hopefully it's a... Oh, yeah, it's unanimous yes. All right, we're raising it. Give me a second, everyone. We're going to bump it up to $20,000. The Lee Spring Army blowing through the goals, and hopefully we can get even higher. So let me go and try and find this one. Help the brave soldiers of Ukraine. There we go. Edit. We'll go over to goal. And now it's time to go and take out that 1 and change it to a 2. So then we click continue and we click save. And there we go. $20,000. Now we're halfway there. And I would sing a little bit of the song halfway there. But Starsky just woke up. I don't want to knock him out with a concussion from my terrible singing. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next segment of news. I think we had covered 3 questions, hadn't we?
So no, we only covered 1 question, actually.
Oh, my Lord. All right, on to the next one.
All right, so the next question is from John Curley, who says, do you think the Russian arms industry is going to be dead after this war, as countries are going to buy more NATO weaponry?
I think that's a that's a great point, that NATO weaponry is far superior to Russian weaponry. However, the Russians do fill a kind of market. Because think about this. Mercedes, let's just say, let's actually suspend reality for a second about the actual mechanics. Mercedes is a far more luxurious and a far nicer car than, say, a Hyundai. However, Hyundais are still bought by a massive amount of people, and that's because Mercedes, while so much better than a Hyundai, is more expensive, and less people therefore can afford it. And a lot of the world works under that same principle. For example, Middle Eastern countries, most of them with smaller economies, couldn't really afford the proper quantity of Western weaponry to make it worth getting it, and so, of course, they will most likely continue to buy Russian weapons because they're cheap, affordable, and, of course, easy to maintain. A conscript can keep an AK running until the end of time. It takes a little bit extra, although the fragility of an M4 is kind of a little overstated. It does take a little bit more expertise, however, to keep an M4 or an M16 running. Just as a base level comparison. So I don't think that the Russian war industry will be knocked out in this war. I think it will actually have a lot of room for contracts, I guess you could say, because they will have to try and fulfill orders for the Russian government, because even if Putin does get thrown out, it's most likely going to be a priority of the next Russian government to rebuild the military again. And also, there's always buying customers around the world for cheap Russian guns and other kinds of Russian gear. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but, you know, that's just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we'll finally be moving on into the next bit of news.
And Enforcer, I have to mention it because people are getting up in arms in the chat. I believe you were talking about the wrong bridge in the last super chat question from James Rios.
The Kherson bridge?
They said the Kerch bridge in the super chat, or excuse me, live chat question.
Oh, well, I'm sorry about that, James Reyes. I was so busy trying to juggle some other stuff, I completely didn't notice that I was talking about the Kherson bridge and not the Kerch bridge. So real quick, to address the Kerch bridge, the Russians, I don't think that traffic jam is deliberate, because if it was deliberate, the Russians would have had control over when it happened. However, the traffic jam was caused because of the Ukrainian attacks on the air bases at Saki, Sevastopol, and also the ammunition depot at Dzhankoy. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sure that they're not being pronounced correctly, but still, the Russians didn't really control those events, and that's what led to the massive traffic jam on the Kerch Bridge, as tens of thousands of Russians were all trying to leave Crimea at the exact same time and cross. So in that regard, to make sure that I actually do address the actual question that was asked, I don't think that was deliberate on the Russians' end. I think that was a unintended side effect of Ukraine's attacks on the Crimean air bases and ammunition depots. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question accurately this time, instead of talking about a completely different bridge. And with that, I think we're now on to the last question of this segment.
And yes, this is the last question of the segment. And real quick, I'm just looking through to see if we do have a question for Operator Starsky. And it looks like we have one here from Sweaty Chungus. So Operator Starsky, this one is for you. Sweaty Chungus says, this question is for Operator Starsky. Can you please recommend a trustworthy organization or even a private group for foreigners who feel compelled to come help with destruction and to help clean up Ukraine?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't know such organizations, but I'm sure that there are quite a few organizations work in the cities. I mean, so you gotta contact local authorities and cooperate together with them, because I think that local authorities, it's like it depends on each city and each region. It's not like we have like one big organization, you know, globally in Ukraine. So you gotta contact authorities of the city you are going to.
Interesting. And so with that, I hope that answers your question, and that is the last question of this segment. And we're now going to be moving on into the next segment of news, which will most likely include everything in the northern area that the Ukrainians have liberated in the Kharkiv Oblast. The entire thing is in the Kharkiv Oblast, so it's really hard to try and quantify where it is. So we'll just call this the northern end of the counteroffensive gains. With that, we're now going to be moving a little bit further behind the lines, and we're going to see that Ukrainians have been having some fun with captured Russian equipment. A lot of fun with it, actually. They're putting it through the ringer. So with that, here's the video. Also, we're going to have to mute it. Copyrighted music scares me. We see the cameraman looking around this dirt road. And here we can see a captured Russian BMP being driven around pretty quickly, and then, boom, the brakes are slammed on. And it looks like that guy almost flipped back and busted his head. But luckily, he caught himself, had some pretty good balance. But man, I have never seen a BMP stop on a dime like that before.
Yeah, they really do. And by the way, that's exactly how my former BTR driver broke his fingers.
Really? What? Can you tell us the story about that?
Yeah, so it's like we were deployed in the Svetlodarsk, and we were moving out on a mission, and I checked my BTR because I was an NCO yet back then. I checked my BTR, everything was okay, and I just walked back to the house to pick my stuff, and before I reached the house, I've been called on a radio, and I've been told that my driver broke his fingers, and I was like, how? I mean, I just saw him like a minute ago. So it appeared that he was driving exactly like that, only it was BTR, not BMP. But it's kind of similar. So when he stopped, the hatch wasn't locked, and he was holding his hand like so he went down into the hatch, but his hand was
Like still on the hatch a little bit.
yeah, not on the hatch, but on the opening, on the doorway, so to say. So when he stopped the BTR, the hatch, because it wasn't locked, because he was an idiot, it slammed his fingers, and he broke all his fingers on his hand. So he didn't go on a mission.
Oh my god. That's
Yeah.
man. That sounds like it would have sucked. And also, that's a that's a pretty nutty story. So tell me this, because I'm actually interested now. Does a BTR flip forwards when the brakes are slammed on like a BMP, or does it more so like just the thing leans forward but the back of it doesn't lift up off the ground?
No, it doesn't lift all the way like BMP, but in case you have your hatch not locked, it can cause some problems.
Man, that's actually a crazy story. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of news, further behind the lines, where we can see near... actually, I'm going to have you pronounce this one, Starsky, real quick.
It's Червона хвиля.
All right, so in that village, because I didn't want to butcher it, we can see that the Ukrainians have captured even more Russian equipment. A pretty decent amount, and if you're a gun collector in the United States, this is enough to make your eyes water. Although I don't think you want to collect Russian guns, because if you've ever bought a Mosin here, you'll know that they're pretty garbage. But we can see that it's just hordes of stuff. All kinds of weapons, really anything you can imagine. The Ukrainians have captured it all, and the Russians left it behind, of course, because they're being routed at the moment. The Russians would have you believe that this is part of their calculated retreat, but really, can't really call that a calculated retreat if they've lost this much supplies and equipment across the entirety of the captured area.
Looks nice. From what I can see here, they have like AKs, RPGs. There was this grenade launcher called Shmel, and it's a thermobaric grenade launcher. And this one is AK-12, I think. I think it's AK-12.
And it's got a really nice sight on it.
Yeah, it's something's wrong with its barrel. It's like either... Yeah, so it's like, is it like flashlight just scotched to the barrel?
It looks like it's, yeah, it looks like it's taped on.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. It's duct tape. Like, you can see it right there. It just wraps around the flashlight in the barrel.
Yeah, the paint is nice though, but the tape.
The tape. That's a pretty rough one right there. And so, and we're going to be moving on from that video and from that jankiness. And we're now going to be moving on to the area of Veliki Burluk. Hopefully I did not mispronounce that too bad. But we can see a little bit of action from the Ukrainians. This marker is not accurate. We don't know if it occurred near this village, but we do know that it has occurred somewhere in the Kharkiv Oblast during this day's counterattack. So with that, here's the video. We can also hear some all around me are familiar faces playing in the background as this Ukrainian fires off the ATGM, and then starts firing his AK as well. You can see him now firing some more. Now the camera comes into focus, and he's in the middle of a very nice, ripe field. I can't tell you if that's wheat, but it looked a lot like it. We now see him walking back a little bit. Oh, what kind of vehicle is that? That's a Kirpy. Oh, that's cool. He's got a Kirpy. In case of y'all... Wait a minute. Hang on. I might be wrong. I think that might be a Bushmaster. Let's pull that up real quick. Bushmaster armored car. Armored vehicle. We'll call it an armored vehicle. Ah, man. Alright, so we're going to have a panel on this one. Does that thing look like a Bushmaster or a Kirpy? No, it's certainly not a Kirpy. Looking at that now. Upon review, that's gotta be a Bushmaster for sure. So we can see that the Australian lended Bushmaster is here with us, with a soldier in the Kharkiv area. Once again, pretty cool to see that foreign equipment is showing up all over the place in Ukraine, and we can also see some Ukrainian soldiers running towards the armored car. The soldier now runs across the street to what appears to be a... I can't really tell you what kind of car that was. We now see him running to a truck, and that's the end of the video. Pretty interesting one, and it's nice to see that Ukrainian forces are still pushing on the attack in the Kharkiv area. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this area and further north towards the village. And real quick, I'm going to have to enlist Operator Starsky's really just Ukrainian reading abilities. What is the name of this village, Starsky?
It's Bili Kolodez.
Bili Kolodez.
Yeah.
All right. So in this village, of course, once again, marker's not entirely accurate, but we put it around the area. We can see more American MRAPs driving through the open areas of Kharkiv and reclaiming the land for Ukraine. Here's the video. Also, once again, more music. I gotta tell you, these videos are like landmines. Every single one of them's got music, but we can see the MRAPs driving forward, and aren't they beautiful?
Lovely.
They're
the coolest looking military vehicle around.
I gotta say, they are the coolest armored car out there. And we can also see a little glint of the Ukrainian flag on the left side of the screen, waving off of the vehicle this person is standing near. And with that, we're now moving all the way to the border, where we saw that today, Ukrainian forces have reached the border and are walking through a border checkpoint that divides Ukraine from Russia. Here's the video of Ukrainian forces on the actual Russian border. You can see the soldier walking back.
Знак стоп поставимо зараз.
Well, you see them showing off a Russian flag that looks like a couple of Russian soldiers may have used for toilet paper.
Поставимо в ту сторону, розверни стоп, хай вони бачать, що стоп.
Yeah, and they say that they gotta set up the stop sign for Russians.
Because that will stop them this time for sure. They won't want to come back after what's happened to them. You now see them taking the stop sign,
повісь на оцю. О,
setting it up on the side of the checkpoint. And keep in mind real quick, I don't know about that last part, what it was showing, but keep in mind that beyond that little red and white striped, pretty much barricade, is Russia. And the Ukrainians have now made it all the way to the border again. Now, with that in mind, and kind of culminating our entire story here on the eastern side of the counterattack, you would think that the Russians would try and spin the story again, try and make up a lie saying that this is all calculated and planned, which they've already done, but on Russian state TV, things are starting to get a little hairy, and I'm actually about to show y'all a clip of the reality of the war hitting a couple of Russian commentators. And so with that, I'm going to have to mute this and read it off to y'all, because of course the captions will be cut off halfway on y'all's viewing of the screen. But with that, here's the video. People who convinced President Putin that the special operation will be fast and effective, we won't strike the civilian population, we'll come in, and our National Guard, along with the Kadyriovites, will... Dang, this guy's talking fast, jeez. Along with the Kadyriovites, will bring things to order. These people really set all of us up. Oh my god! Now they're playing the blame game. Things have gone so terribly. This guy is now sitting here and saying, if this wasn't really Putin's plan, these were some bad actors inside of Russia who lied to us and brought us into a death trap.
It's always like that. It's like they have this good Tsar, this leader, and he's always surrounded by those like bad, corrupted politicians.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the craziest thing about it is that you can see that these Russian news commentators, or well, these commentators at all, I wouldn't call it news, they're now trying to spin the story so that way it's not Putin's fault, and the anger of the public isn't directed at him, but it's directed at someone else. And that kind of tells me that within the Russian government, there must be a little bit of news getting around that the war might start to end in defeat, and so let's start spinning a story of who to blame rather than Putin, so that way the whole entire government doesn't come down.
Yeah, yeah. So in my opinion, it's a good indication that they will recognize their defeat very, very soon.
Probably so. And then also, this is the best thing. Going back to reading this off, the host says, "Are you sure? Are you sure these people exist?" Of course, the president didn't just sit there and think, "Why don't I start a special operation?" Wasn't that what he did? Isn't that what he did?
It's hilarious.
Oh man, dude, you know, honestly, I think if we got all of Russia, the Russian state TV's channels and put them on something like Netflix or Hulu in the United States, I think that this would be the #1 rated comedy around the world is Russian state TV. But with that, we're going to go back to read it off since that didn't get a laugh. I was like, well, I mean, like, but anyways, someone told him that Ukrainians will surrender, that they will flee, and that they'll want to join Russia. Someone had to have been telling him all of this. They also said the same on TV. We're now at the point when we have to understand it's absolutely impossible to defeat Ukraine. Using those resources and colonial war methods, with Russia, which Russia is trying to wage war, using contract soldiers, mercenaries, no mobilization, a strong army is opposing the Russian army. Fully supported by the most, golly, this guy's, like, tempo was way off. Fully supported by the most powerful countries in the economic and technological sense, including European countries. Host, are you suggesting military mobilization? I'm suggesting peace talks about stopping the war and moving on to dealing with political issues. Host, should we start negotiations? There can't be any negotiations. With Zelensky's Nazi regime. Zelensky's Nazi regime has to be destroyed, but the other guy just said it plainly. You know, and also what we're seeing on the front line says it pretty plainly. How in the world is this guy going to still act like there's a standpoint that the Russians could possibly win this war when we're seeing that their entire front line is dissolved? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe Starsky, maybe you can tell us if that makes sense or not, because I think there might be just a smidgen in there of common sense amongst them all.
Yeah, but it's like you see, there's no such thing as something unexpected on Russian TV. I bet all of that crap is already staged, and they will come up with some conclusion, you know, regarding this. But the important thing is that we already see that they are not unanimous in their opinion towards Ukraine, and that they already start probing this idea among their society that probably like they are being defeated, and probably they should talk, you know. So in my opinion, it's a good indication. It's a very positive thing for us.
And it certainly is. And also, I think that there may be a smidgen of common sense in here with this guy saying here that there can't be any negotiations. Why doesn't he go to the front lines? Because if there can't be any negotiations, then he ought to be out there making sure that they can't happen. Maybe we can all agree on that this fellow ought to be out there on the front.
Yeah, well, he has this mark of Satan on his jacket, so we should all understand that, you know, he won't agree on that, of course.
That's true, that's true. And also, speaking of which, I don't think, now that you've said Mark of Satan about the letter Z, I don't think I can ever look at the letter Z the same way again. But anyways, getting back to reading this, host, Nadezhin thinks we have to strengthen either mobilization in full-scale war, or we get out. Recently, Vladimir Putin said, "We haven't even started yet. We'll start when we need to. We don't need mobilization. Pardon me, but what are we waiting for? You say everything is going according to the plan. Does anyone really believe that 6 months ago we planned to be leaving Balaklia, repelling a counteroffensive near Kharkiv? Could not take Kharkiv and leave Balaklia? Don't forget, we're fighting against a NATO bloc with the hands of well-prepared Ukrainians. This is a serious army and their weapons are serious. Our military intelligence should have predicted this. War is war. You can't predict everything. But we have the will to continue until our victory. Or do they? War is a very complex notion. It has political and psychological components. During the last several days, we've been dealt a severe psychological blow. How about a severe physical blow as well, regarding our non-comrade Nadezhin? I again urge you to watch your language.
And another interesting thing is that this dude actually called this a war. You cannot call this a war in Russia, otherwise you will get arrested big time.
So this fella you're saying is probably going to be going to the old gulag here in about a week.
He's gonna get beaten.
He's gonna come back on TV all like bruised up and stuff, saying it's a special military operation. Also, speaking of which, speaking about a good joke, I have seen some of your little short videos on your channel, and I love that you're going into like the comedy shorts, because they're actually really good, and I bet a lot of people in here can agree that they're pretty solid.
Thank you so much. More to come.
So with that, we're going to let this keep on going.
And Enforcer, I want to say real quick, I'm seeing a lot of people in the live chat say that this is all scripted. And I tend to agree with them. I think that most of this is scripted. There's nothing that is being said here that wasn't approved beforehand. So they're going to take turns beating this guy up for saying what he just said, but I think it was designed that way.
Probably so, probably. But then again, you have to think that at the beginning of this war, this kind of talk within the first 3 to 4 months was never allowed, even if it was scripted on Russian TV. And so even if it is scripted, you can get the idea that the Russians are having to start changing the narrative to where there can be dissenting voices, so that way they can maybe try and slowly change the public's opinion to where the blame can be directed at someone else rather than Putin. So it does show something interesting, but also due to time reasons and how much time we've already spent on this video, we're going to have to skip over it because honestly, I don't really feel like reading off more of it. They pretty much said the original points within the first few minutes. But if y'all would like to watch the clip, make sure to go into the description below where there is a copy of today's map. Just click on the link. It'll take you directly to this, and then you can see exactly everything you want in whatever order you want. But we're now going to be moving out of Moscow and into an unknown location in Russia where we can see Russian soldiers being trained, probably to be put into this war. And so let's see how these Russian soldiers' training goes. What the hell? What is this? Do you see this, Matthew? They start shooting down the range, and the range instructor takes an AK and just starts firing it at this guy's head. What in the world?
What in the world? Wait, is this their version of training?
This is their version of training with live ammo.
I'm assuming those are blanks, right?
No, they're not. You can see the ricochet of the bullets off the ground and the dirt being thrown up in front of that guy's head. What
that is insane.
Do they do that in Ukraine?
I have seen a place, or not a place, I have seen somebody do this before in a different military training video, but I'm not sure which country it was, but it was insane.
Now,
I think it was something like either Thailand or Indonesia.
Yes.
I guess. But it was like a bit different because they were firing like at a distance. Not as close to those soldiers as we can see here.
So let me ask you this, Starsky: did the Ukrainians do something similar to this?
Oh my God, no. We used those miles systems. So you know what I'm talking about? So it's like a laser attached to your AK, and then you have like vest with sensors, and we're firing blanks. So when you fire, the impulse activates the laser, and it sends the beam to the sensor that is located on the vest. So it starts beeping, signalizing that you're either wounded or dead, and we're using blanks, and of course not at close range because it's dangerous, but nothing like that. Come on.
So it sounds honestly like some high-tech laser tag.
Actually, those were given to us by the U.S. back in 2015 or 2016, I guess.
Interesting. That's actually good to know that y'all don't do anything as crazy as this. And I think the Russians would have to be on their own, pretty much in the world, rather than Indonesia, which we've mentioned just a second. Go ahead, Matthew.
Now, Enforcer, it would be a big plot twist if the range officer simply had some beef with the guy on the ground.
Well, I think if he had some beef with the guy, his head would look like jelly at this point. But, oh my god, that's just insane. So they continue to fire. We can see that this guy is having a little bit of trouble reloading his machine gun. It looks like he's having to fiddle with it. He's now picking it up and moving further down the range. You see that one of them is now crouched to fire, which is a mistake. The range officer will now take off his head.
Oh
or
my
at least
god. That is crazy.
This is unsafe. This is the definition of unsafe, and I think if there was an OSHA inspector nearby, they would have a problem with this.
If you flinch, you're done.
Yeah, if you, like, wait a minute, think about this for a second. You notice how they get up and they start running? What if he aims, like he did just a second ago, right in front of that guy, and he gets up and turns right and starts running at the exact same time? You're getting minced Russian right there on the spot. Honestly, I think that probably an equal number of Russian soldiers die in training than on the front line with this kind of stupid training.
If I was a Russian, I would say this is how our grandparents trained. Because well, they usually say crap like that when they do that.
Man, I gotta. It's just insane. Like, I don't think anyone can really justify this kind of training because it's so high risk with low reward. It doesn't really teach them much because it doesn't really provide anything. I mean, like, some people say it gets them desensitized to gunfire, but at the same time, when you watch Russian soldiers, which I'm assuming go through this training regularly, on the front lines in a firefight, they are never used to it, even under situations like these. So all you're doing is putting these dudes at risk of being shot by the range instructor instead of being shot at the front line. So it doesn't really provide much, and it just looks stupid when you watch it on film. But with that
Russian style, bravery and nonsense.
Russian style, strong shooting leg, great to go. So with that, we're now going to be moving back down towards Ukraine and back to our Kharkiv area where we've gotten a little bit of additional news. However, there is a little bit of a story to be had here as of last night. The Russians are a little angry, so suffice to say, that their make-believe world has once again been disrupted by the Ukrainians, and they're being pushed out of the country at a breakneck speed. So they've decided to start attacking Ukraine's power grid with ballistic and cruise missiles, and we can see one of these Iskanders being fired from the Belgorod region earlier last night. Matthew, it looks like you threw up another yes or no poll.
Yes, I know.
Oh, man. And 80% voted yes.
Of course. They're the positive people.
They're very optimistic. And you can see these Iskanders continuing to fly.
So they launched 12 missiles, and I think 9 of them were intercepted. But unfortunately, 3 of them reached their targets.
And one of those targets, speaking of which, was the TES-5 power plant that largely feeds the electrical grid near Kharkiv. And we can see some of the footage of the fires that broke out at the Kharkiv power plant due to these unsolicited attacks. Directing fire at these power grids is practically an act of terrorism by the Russians because, just to explain real quick, the Ukrainian armed forces that are pushing and liberating the areas east of the city of Kharkiv do not really rely on the power grid for their functioning. So this is largely directed at the civilian population within the Kharkiv area and the surrounding electrical grids that will be affected. And so here's one of the videos showing one of the fires that has broken out of the Kharkiv power plant.
And if I can add, there's another funny thing. So Belgorod is largely connected to the same grid. So when the grid shut down, the electricity was gone in Belgorod as well.
Interesting. That's the Russians in their own anger lash out and hurt themselves. And that's of course what you would expect from the Russians. And we also have a second perspective of the power plant being hit. We unfortunately at the moment do not know how extensive the damage was to the power plant or if it can be repaired in a short amount of time, but hopefully it can be. We'll have to try and get some more information on this as time goes by. See the explosions in the distance. And once again, another example of an unsolicited attack on civilian infrastructure by the Russian armed forces and retaliation for the successful Ukrainian counterattacks that are ongoing in the Kharkiv Oblast. With that, that's the end of that video. And we're now going to be returning back to the front lines, now that we've covered that short story, to a town called, hopefully I'm getting this correct, Hoptivka.
Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So with that, we can see that Hoptivka was liberated, and we can also see the soldiers pose with a couple of flags within the village for a little bit of a photo shoot and celebration. And so without further ado, here's that video.
11 вересня Hoptivka перейшла під контроль Збройних сил України. 130-й ВАТ передає привіт всьому народу України. Наше завдання – слава Україні! Героям слава!
And with that, that's the end of that video. And speaking of this northern area, I know that I marked the entire area yesterday as liberated. Well, that's because it was practically common sense, well, logical at that point. The Ukrainians hadn't pushed the Russians entirely to the border as of yesterday. There was about a mile of ground left, but might as well just adjust the front lines for that mile that would be lost the next day. As we can see there, the Ukrainians were in a village that was just less than probably half a mile away from the border. Actually, almost exactly a mile. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv front and over real quick into our location unknowns, because we have some interesting ones to show. Starting off, we can see the Ukrainians having a little bit of drone fun. And of course, I'm not going to drone on and on and on about the drones. We're just going to let y'all show them what they do best. Pun intended. We can also hear some music, which we have to mute. We now see the bomblet being dropped. And it looks like that guy turned around and decided it wasn't the best time for him to walk forward. And we now see another one being dropped. And as Starsky would say, they're being turned into good Russians.
Improved.
New and improved. They're Russians 2.0. We can also see some artillery coming down on this tree line. Pretty accurate. It's all falling within the spread of the tree line alone. And the artillery continues to rain down as this video ends, once again showing the effectiveness of Ukrainian fire. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a 152mm gun being fired at Russian positions. A pretty short video, but it's still always neat to see the Ukrainian heavy artillery in action. And so, here's the video. Also, there's music. So unfortunately, I could not play the audio of it firing, but when you see him pulling the cord, I forgot the exact name for that cord, but we can now see the artillery piece fire, and what a scene, and hopefully hitting the Russians dead on. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainian SBU at work. Kind of the equivalent of the American FBI. Also, we can hear them playing music as well. Bomblets being dropped onto Russian vehicles. And nice fires ensuing.
These videos, I think they were published by we have this counter-espionage unit in the SBU. SBU is basically like CIA, but they're more like militaries, and they have this counterintelligence or counter-espionage unit within SBU, and that's exactly what they do now.
Interesting. And it looks like they're doing a pretty good job at it based off of these videos. Just look at that. Doesn't that look like a nice toasted marshmallow over a campfire? I'd have to say they're doing a pretty good job. And also, nice little turret toss. It looks like that one may have gotten some air to land that far away.
It was 7 out of 10.
Yeah, 7 out of 10. Unfortunately, we couldn't see it in flight. We can also see another smoldering tank, turret upturned. Now, the Ukrainians always have some really good manners, you see, because when you're, as a kid, you're always told that when you're done with your food, you turn your fork upside down to let everyone know that you're done eating. And it looks like the Ukrainians do a pretty good job at that with the tanks, because they always turn the Russian turrets upside down whenever they're done taking them out, as we can see in those two instances on film.
And obviously those turrets spend more time flying than Russian pilots.
Solid jokes from Operator Starsky. He will be here only today, though, sadly. He won't be here all week. I was about to say he'll be here all week, but then some people will probably take that seriously. So with that, we are on to the next one, where we can see that the HIMARS was added again. And of course, we all know the song that goes la 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 la. But anyways, I'm about to get copyrighted for just doing that alone. But we can see here the damage that the HIMARS has wrought onto this convoy that was traveling down this road in an unknown location.
Oh, so I know the story behind this video. So those Russians were retreating from, I think, either Izyum or Kupiansk, probably like Izyum. And as they were retreating, our HIMARS systems hit them, the column.
Oh, man. Yeah, I've never actually heard of the HIMARS being used to target military vehicles. It seems so far in this war it's been used to target logistical infrastructure like bridges, ammunition depots. I think this is the first time on film we've seen a HIMARS attack be directed against a convoy of military like vehicles and soldiers.
Yeah, probably the reason is that it was like important to destroy as much of their vehicles as possible, because they have already left a lot of vehicles
And
in
that
Kupiansk and in Izyum.
And that's true. And also, y'all are getting a whole brand new allotment of used Russian vehicles, courtesy of the involuntary Russian special lend-leasing operation. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip, where we can see that the Ukrainians encountered a Putin mask. And it looks like they did a little bit of a... Well, I would like to try and figure out how to make pissin rhyme with Putin, but y'all just see in the video. Here's the video.
Хочу вже таку роботу, щоб я тако прийшов, ніхуя тако не роблю, тако поїв, тако випив півка, тако посидів, попіздєл, блядь, і тако мені кажуть, на, тримай гроші, спасибо, що прийшов.
With that,
It was hilarious. He was like, it's like a typical Ukrainian joke. He's like, I would like to have a job. I come to the facility. I do nothing. I just exchange couple words with my colleagues, and then I'm given money, and I'm told, thank you for coming.
and I like the addition that he added in on the video. It was a very nice one. And I'd have to say, honestly, Starsky, I don't know if you're huge into water fountains or anything, but this would be a perfect feature for a water fountain. Just like a stone bust of Putin, and have the water spray going straight towards his head.
Yeah, by the way, I gotta propose that. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that Zelenskyy should look into as kind of like a monument to Putin in Kyiv, since they were supposed to be there sometime around. When was that again? When were they supposed to be in Kyiv?
In 3 days or something.
Yeah, I mean, what happened to that? I think they're running a little bit behind schedule. Might be running late. But we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure that it's all it's a sign of goodwill. With that, we're now moving on into the next video where we can see another destroyed Russian column. See a lot of smoke rising off the ground, and some charred Russian vehicles that almost look like charcoal. With that, that's the end of the video, and once again, a beautiful one to see. We're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see the perfect floor mat. Now, Starsky, I think this is about to become a top seller in Ukraine, because there's been no floor mat that could be any better. So with that, if this video loads, now that it's not wanting to load, come on, here's the video, and there's the floor mat.
Где вытирайте ноги, будете идти,
Ну что, 200-я бригада, Сосну, ДРО Харькова, блядь. Умножили вас на 0, как и обещали, блядь.
Those guys are from Kharkiv's territorial defense.
Oh, nice. I wish he had known that so he could locate it earlier. Because now we got it in the location unknowns, but what can we do? Now see them putting up the Ukrainian flag. And making sure to shine their shoes with the Russian flag.
Yes, it's important.
It's very important. I think, however, due to all the fecal matter that's on each and every Russian flag, it most likely will not make a great shoe polisher, but it could be a decent buff. With that, that's the end of that video, and we're now moving on to our final one of Location Unknowns, where we can see some fast advancing Humvees of the Ukrainian Armed Forces in an open field. And when I mean fast, I mean like fairly fast for an open field. So here's the video. Also, there's some copyrighted music there, and YouTube is pulling out the baseball bats and Tommy guns, and they're getting ready to come down here and get me. So, you see the Ukrainians pretty much doing some donuts in this field. Now racing towards the tree line. And I've got to say, I'm actually fairly impressed with the speed they're driving these Humvees at in an open field, because, you know, who knows if there's like a mole hole or a gopher hole or anything out there that the axle might fall into and bend the axle. But gotta say, that's actually really impressive to see that a farm field could be this flat without any, I guess you could say, imperfections. Because in America, this would statistically be like impossible.
Russians talked a lot about what we see now in their social media, actually. So when this attack on Kupiansk, I think, started, no, it wasn't Balaklia. When the attack on Balaklia started, so those were basically our paratroopers in those Humvees. And when the attack started, they approached Russians very, very rapidly, and their artillery was ineffective against those Humvees because, you know, they were so fast. That's why Russians started their retreat. It was like all over their social media. They were like screaming. Yeah, it was funny to read.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that. That's pretty cool. And also, I guess it's like Ukraine's equivalent of like the Toyota Hilux at this point. You know, like a fast little moving car, pretty much with a machine gun on top of it. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our final segment of news for the night. Starsky is probably just finally waking up, so and we're kind of winding down here at the same time, kind of like reverse energies in a way. But before we get to this last news segment, which will cover the rest of the news we have for the night, we're going to address 3 questions from the chat, also take a look at the fundraiser, and of course, promote it again. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks. So for our second to last question segment of the stream, we are currently sitting at $14,000 on our $20,000 goal on the fundraiser for Razom. So excellent progress. We're getting a lot of large donations in here in the last 10 minutes or so. So big thanks to everyone for your generosity. And we also have a quite long list of top donors as well. While my spreadsheet locks up, but Enforcer, whenever you're ready, I can go over those for you.
And let's hear them.
And up first, we have a $200 donation from Fred Fred Barr, or Bear, but thank you very much for your generosity. We have a $150 donation from David Smith and Naxus Fox, as well as a $125 donation from Rick McGee, a $120 donation from Tangent, as well as several $100 donations. And bear with me on this. We have a $100 donation from Travel ICEU RN, Peter Hansen, David Tikachuk, Philip Truitt, BC Skyman, MMC, and then we have several $50 donations. We had the first one from Nick Gaspy, NOYDB, Smarzig, Steve I, Jennifer Burling, Sampo Sorella, Greg Carrier, Chambana12, Eagle Anderson, Nicholas, and Swindon Badger. And real quick, let me make sure I didn't miss one in the live chat. And it looks like we are good. So thank you to all of you for all your donations, small and large. They all add up and help us to reach our goal.
And also, I would like to thank you all so much once again. The Lee Spring Army is unbelievable in our fundraising abilities and how much we've supported Ukraine over these past several dozen weeks. And of course, at this point right now, I'm looking at this fundraiser, and we are only $5,500 away from the $20,000 goal. We already blew through the $10,000 one, and I'm wondering if we can all come together to blow through that $20,000 goal. Of course, it goes to help out Ukrainian soldiers once they get done with this war. They do have to return to normal life because hopefully this war will not last for much longer, and they will have to have some kind of help, perhaps, maybe trying to get some higher education, so that way they can fill in some of those nice, sweet jobs that bring in the sweet cash. And so with that, I hope y'all do support out the fundraiser because it does help out Ukrainian soldiers to that end. And with that, we're now going to address 3 questions from the chat. And real quick, Matthew, we actually addressed a lot of questions that were focused on me, and I was wondering, since Operator Starsky is on here only tonight, and there's not a lot of times that he is on, could we get 2 questions for him to start us off?
And yes, we can, but first we do have a couple of polls to address, and also a few more donations. So up first, we have a $250 donation from John in New Hampshire, as well as another $100 donation from BC Skyman, and 2 $50 donations. We have one from Pilot and Darren Maynard. So big thanks to you once again for your support of the fundraiser, and we're going to reach our goal in no time. I'm very confident in that. And moving on to our first poll, let me move over to my second screen. The first one said, do you like the MRAPs the best out of Ukraine's military trucks? It looks like 77% of you said, yes, so cool. And 23% said, no, there are better ones. And folks, y'all know where I stand on this. The MRAPs are some of the coolest military trucks out there. But Enforcer and Starsky, what are y'all's take?
Man, I honestly think the MRAP is the coolest. It's undoubted to me, but then again, I'm kind of biased because it's American and we're American. But what do you think, Starsky? What's your favorite armored car of the war?
The ones that I used personally, Kazakh, like one of the first Ukrainian armored vehicles, Ukrainian produced. Not bad, but it's kind of hard. There was Varta. It looks similar to Kazakh, and it was much better. It was much softer. Yeah, that one. That one was my favorite, basically, because you could fit almost a squad of men inside, plus all of their stuff, which is great. It has much more space inside. On the other hand, it's quite tall, which makes it a perfect target. And there's also Novator armored vehicle. Novator. Yeah. And it's much better one. I think it's one of the best ones that we have. It's quite low, and I don't really like tall vehicles for obvious reasons. And this one is widely used by our guys in like special forces and recon and stuff like that.
Well, I gotta say, you actually listed off a load of them, but they all do look pretty cool. Out of all of them, though, I would have to agree with you. The Novator looks like, you know, just of course not really assessing it for its actual attributes or qualities just off of looks. It is the coolest looking one of the group, but still, me being American, I always have to back up the old MRAP, because the MRAP, of course, is America's first, I guess you could say, attempt at a blast-protected vehicle. This was made to replace the Humvees that were being used in Iraq and Afghanistan, and there's no way I can turn against this thing. It is just cool through and through, and pretty mean looking on top of that, but still, interesting to hear. And also, do you all agree with Starsky that the Novator is a neat-looking armored car? Because it does look pretty cool, but is it better than the MRAP? That's an interesting
It does look
question.
pretty cool. I will say the front kind of looks like resembles a Jeep a little bit in the grill.
It kind of does, doesn't it? I was thinking that. I wasn't wanting to say it, though, because then Jeep's going to be asking for royalties, but it does look like that. But still a cool look nonetheless. And so with that, let's go on to the next poll.
And the next poll was in reference to that high-stakes target training video. And the question was, do you believe the Russian high-stakes target training serves a legitimate purpose? Only 16% said yes, it desensitizes soldiers to fear. 20% said somewhat, but I am skeptical. And 64% said no, it is risky with no benefit. And as we mentioned earlier, there are other countries that do this technique. However, it's unclear if it actually produces any real results. So I would have to fall within the somewhat, but I am skeptical category. It's certainly risky. I mean, there's no doubt about that. If you twitch or have a little a spasm attack for a minute, you're going to be in some deep trouble. But what are y'all's thoughts?
Honestly, I kind of covered this one a little bit earlier. I do think it's just incredibly unsafe and doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'll hand it over to Starsky real quick.
So, for example, what kind of training we had was that we would go out in a field, in formations, and we had those targets set up in different locations. Like, for example, there was imitated Russian position with actual targets, and we had to shoot them. First, we of course had to spot them, signalize our guys that we have a contact, and tell the range and direction and stuff, and this basically trains your coordination and cooperation inside of your unit. And another thing is those miles systems that I've been talking about previously. Both of those exercises, they train you in terms of, you know, your skills, your ability to communicate, cooperate, and with mile systems and blank bullets, you have basically the result that those Russians tried to achieve. So I think what they did was completely pointless.
And I would have to completely agree with that. And so now that we've all addressed the poll, let's move on to the questions.
All right, and we are placing a priority on questions for Operator Starsky tonight. So the first question is from David Lichtenstein, who says, Operator Starsky, will Ukraine eventually fire into Russia, or was all the ammo provided only able to be used for defensive and not an offensive?
I can see 0 point in penetrating into Russian territory. 0 point, because, like, what's the sense? We are fighting for our land that we should control. Like occupying some Ryazan or, I don't know, Krasnodar, it's gonna drain our resources very, very fast. I mean, it's the hostile territory. It's a foreign territory. We don't need that.
And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up we have a question from Smell Me Fingers, who put in that $2,000 donation earlier to United 24, and he says, question for Operator Starsky, how's your grandpa going, and has he used his shotgun yet?
He's not my personal grandpa. We all call him grandpa because he's so cool. And hopefully he will not have to use his shotgun anymore for reasons other than, I don't know, hunting probably, or shooting thieves. Yeah, but he's doing well. I saw him recently. I meds and stuff, so I see him from time to time because he has this issues with like lungs and heart, and I have like a list of meds that I'm buying for him.
And so with that, I hope that answers that question for you, and we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we'll be moving into our last bit of news for the night.
And the final question of the segment goes to Sweet 70433, who says, a question for Operator Starsky. Can a Ukrainian set off the nuclear danger sound to rid the nuclear power plant of Russian rats?
I cannot answer this question. I'm not an expert. So, what's your thought on this, Enforcer?
Can you reread that one to me real quick, Matthew?
And also to clarify, basically they're asking, are the Ukrainians willing to basically do a psyop on the Russians at the power plant and sound off a false alarm to scare them to leave it, to think it's melting down so they can get them out of there and take it back over?
I don't really know, honestly, because that's an interesting idea of a ruse, but at the same time, you got to think, what would the Ukrainians do? Because they would have to launch a landing party, most likely from the other side of the Dnieper reservoir, to then secure the power plant after the Russians left, because otherwise the Russians would just drive back in several hours later after seeing that the nuclear power plant didn't explode, and then they'd be right back where they were, and all that would have happened was a short scare. And then if the Ukrainians go over there and then try and secure the power plant, then it becomes a undefensible position, because supplying those forces that would try and take the power plant wouldn't really have a decent logistical connection. And then it would create an actual battlefield around the Enhedar nuclear power plant for the second time, much like there was at the original part of the war, where I believe it was the Ukrainian National Guard tried to defend the power plant for a short while, and also all of the subsequent attacks that the Russians had perpetrated on the power plant through MLRS attacks, among many other kinds that we've seen on film. So, in my opinion, I would think it's a very good idea for a ruse. I think if the Ukrainians were actually covering ground, through a more conventional means, heading that direction, that would be a smart idea to get the Russians out of there instead of having to fight them to try and regain control of the power plant. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we've reached the end of this question segment. We're now going to move on to cover the final bit of news for the night, and also, just real quick, just for those of you all to know, we have the fundraiser for Razom for Ukraine set at a $20,000 goal. And right now, I think we are almost cresting $16,000. We only have $4,000 left, and just to do some quick math, let's see, we got 4,000 left. If as many of y'all that could gave $5 each, 800 of y'all putting in $5 could put us over the top of this goal for the night. So keep that in mind. There are 10.3 thousand people on this live stream right now, and if you throw in just $5 for 800 of y'all, we will be well over $20,000 at that point, and on our way to something even higher, although we won't move the goal above 20,000. And so with that, we're now moving on to the area of Bakhmut, where we got a neat picture today of Ukrainian artillery firing. And here's that picture. Once again, pretty cool to see. And while we can see this artillery firing, we know that in this area, the Ukrainian forces are holding back the Russians and making sure that they cannot take the surrounding villages of Soledar and everything south of Bakhmut. Also, on top of that, the Ukrainian offensive in the northern area of the Eastern Front has kind of detracted Russia's attention from really everywhere else, and so there's not a lot of pressure around the rest of the front lines from what we know, at least that we can confirm on video and picture evidence. And so with that, we are moving on further down the line to the area of Donetsk, where we actually got some interesting Russian drone footage of Ukrainians apparently pushing a counterattack in the Pisky area. Considering that this came from Russian footage, we showed it on stream tonight because it's not giving away any information the Russians don't already know, considering that it was filmed by them from drone. But this was an impressive counterattack. It was well organized, and although they would fall back, the retreat, well, not really the retreat, I guess you could say more so the falling back, was very organized and orderly, which shows that the Ukrainians are well trained and, of course, like we've always known. So with that, here's the video. And also, we're muting that. We can see the Ukrainian tanks and armored personnel carriers advancing through the field, and we can see a decent cluster here. We can see what appears to be 2 T-72s and 2 BMP-2s. You can see them advancing forward. And we can also see another Ukrainian vehicle further back in the tree line. We can now see artillery coming down. The Ukrainian infantry has now disembarked the vehicles. And we can see pretty much all vehicles involved in this push firing. We can see some of the BMP-2s firing off their autocannons, artillery raining all around the offensive. But once again, the Ukrainians, as brave as they've always been, continue to push forward and try and advance and push the Russians out of this area. When you see the lead T-72 leading the charge, but smoke has covered the area. And unfortunately, we've lost sight of the Ukrainian vehicles and formation to see what kind of progress they're making. We can see that one of the tanks was hit near the fuel tank on the rear of the engine bay, letting us know that most, if not any, of the crew was not wounded whatsoever. And we can now see that that hit has somewhat, has made the Ukrainians decide that they will need to withdraw and come up with another plan. And we can now see the armored personnel carriers and tanks screening the infantry as they continue to withdraw. We can also see a second Ukrainian main battle tank has pulled forward to make sure to cover the first one that was hit in the group. And while the Ukrainians did not push the Russians out of this area, it's always important to show that the Ukrainians are well collected and well organized. We can see that after the crew of this Ukrainian tank has bailed out, the second Ukrainian tank that came to screen for it is now falling back as well and firing to cover its retreat. It was a well-organized push, and it was also a well-organized withdrawal from the area. It does show that Ukrainians do possess the high level of training, and also another thing is that this may have just been a simple probing attack. These do occur often within wars to try and see where there may be a weak spot in enemy lines that can be exploited by a small push like this. Very interesting to see, and once again, a great sign that Ukrainian forces are well put together and well trained, considering how nicely put together that all looked. Hopefully they'll be able to push the Russians out of the area, because as far as I know, the Russians are still on the Republic Bridge. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the area of Donetsk. We haven't gotten any news beyond this today, and the Russians, by and large, of course, have more important things to focus on, like the collapse of the northern eastern area. With that, we're now moving all the way down to the southern front, south of Orikhiv. This marker is not accurate, but we've seen some pretty odd footage from the Russians. This footage, and also I'd like you to note this, Starsky, because this is an interesting one. This footage shows a Russian drone looking at a Ukrainian van. This drone will drop a bomblet onto the van. It bounces off the door frame and explodes in the van, but the van we see at the beginning of this footage looks pretty different from the one we'll see in a second. The one in a second looks like it had been beaten up by something on the ground before this drone was even able to hit it. And so here's the video. We can see the van right there, Ukrainian soldier walking off. And when we see it again, it looks like it's been sitting out for some time. You can see that on the original clip, there were no red stains on the roof, but in the second one, we can see two of the doors open. It looks like the windshield was busted out, and now there's red stripes and streaks on the roof. It kind of suggests to me that this van may have been abandoned for a while, and this footage may have been taken some other time. Because it looks like this van has gone through the ringer in between the first clip and the second clip that was edited in. Also, there are no Ukrainians around in this film. With that, that's the end of the video, and a pretty interesting one at that. We're now going to be moving out of the southern front and towards the Kherson area, and funnily enough, while the Kherson area was what we focused on the most when the counterattack started here, of course all of the focus has been taken to the wildly successful northeastern counterattacks that have been occurring in this area. Down here in Kherson, while the progress is still going on, it is of course taking a backseat to the Ukrainians just steamrolling the Russians in the north. Starting off, we can see the Russians being hit by the 406th Artillery Brigade somewhere around Arkhangelsk, which hopefully I got that pronunciation correct. We can see Russian vehicles kind of interspersed amongst the construction equipment. And now we can see the Ukrainian artillery, not Ukrainian cartillery, coming down onto the area and hitting the Russians pretty decently. That was a very decent hit. What did that hit, actually?
Actually, I saw this video. It was said that our troops were using M777s.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice to know that Western gear is coming back to save the day. And we can also see the fuel. I think that may just be a fuel tank that was hit and is now caught on fire. The artillery continues to rain down. And of course, Operator Starsky just said that these are M777s that are being used in this barrage. And once again, their deadly accuracy can clearly be seen. We now see the drone getting some pretty good altitude and taking a look at this destroyed Russian operating base. Fires are coming from everywhere now. We can see one of the Russian vehicles racing down the road and trying to get out of there. Ural 4320s continue to explode. And I gotta say, one thing that the Russians do best is make nice smoke screens. They always are trying to make the best one, and I think this one's giving all of them a run for their money. You see more explosions rocking over the Russian equipment. And now, a very steady fire coming off of that Ural. With that, that's the end of the video, and once again, huge credit to the Ukrainian artillerists who have continued to hit Russian units with deadly accuracy. We're now going to be moving further down the line to a marker that's in the Kherson area, but we don't know if it's in this exact spot, where we saw the Ukrainians destroy a Russian tank. Well, actually, we didn't see them destroy it, we just saw the aftermath. Still, good enough in my book. We can see the abandoned Russian tank right there, clearly destroyed, and in worse for wear state. That's the end of the video, and it's pretty neat to see that even more Russian equipment and vehicles are being destroyed not just in the northeast, but still in the Kherson area. Moving on down to our second to last bit of news from the Kherson area, we saw a Russian drone that was at a fairly high altitude observe a Ukrainian MiG-29 conducting attacks on Russian forces in the area. This was a really cool perspective because this is one of the few times we've seen an aircraft in operation from above it on a stationary camera. When you see the Ukrainian MiG-29 streaking its way across the fields and into the distance. You see the MiG-29 turning into a small speck and popping off its flares. We've now lost sight of the MiG-29. I'm trying to see where it is. When you see that it's taking a right, the camera is now going left. Once again, great job on the Russians' part for keeping track of what's actually happening here. And it looks like that MiG-29 actually dropped a dumb bomb onto a Russian position. We can see it right there, the cloud of the explosion billowing up. And let's try and see when that actually happened. Right there, that was definitely a bomb. We just watched the Ukrainians conduct a bombing run on the Russians. What kind of incompetence do the Russians have for a jet to actually fly over your position and drop a bomb onto it? That just tells you how bad off the Russian forces really are. This is some World War II era stuff right here that the Ukrainians just pulled off, and they pulled it off without a hitch. You can see the MiG-29 continues to fly off, and now the Russians are trying to take a look at what kind of damage has been caused to their own forces. With that, That's the end of the video. Once again, great to see that the Ukrainians are besting the Russians, even when you would think they couldn't, like in a situation like that. We're now going to be moving down to our last marker from the area, where we can see Ukrainian forces assaulting Russian positions in the Kherson Oblast. We don't know specifically where this was, but it was a pretty interesting film. And so without further ado, here's the video. Copyrighted music, and we have to mute that. We can see this BMP continuing to speed forward. The helmet camera showing us how rocky of a ride it kind of is. And they continue to advance down this open area. Looks like something just got fired off the... Actually, those are casings being spent from the AK as it fires off the top of the BMP. And this area looks like it got blitzed. We now see the Ukrainians dismounting from the BMP and continuing to fire forwards as the BMP looks over to the right. You see this Ukrainian soldier firing and advancing at the same time towards what we can assume is Russian soldiers. I'm just going to get my mouse on screen and get ready to pause this and get off of it, just in case if there's something here that I didn't see last time. You now see the Ukrainian soldier hit the ground for a second. And now he's getting back up. We can now see him looking around and trying to assess his surroundings. We have not seen him fire the AK yet again. We now see the Ukrainian soldier crouching down on the ground again, but kind of walking forward. Can't tell if he's crouching or standing at this point. We now see another explosion happen in front of the cameraman. We now see them get down again. It seems like another grenade was thrown and explodes in front of them. Very close this time. We now see a little bit of dust kick up in front of them. The Ukrainian soldier begins to fire into that crater. Looks like there might be a Russian in there. We now see them both walking forward and looking into the crater. Dirt being kicked up again. You now see the cameraman looking around for a second, trying to get a good look inside that crater through this opening. Now begins to walk forward, and he looks into the dugout and starts firing into it rapidly. He then backs away. The rest of the Ukrainian soldiers are standing around. The next one then moves forward and starts firing into the dugout. He then retreats as well from the dugout opening. And now we can see the third guy. It looks like he may be about to give it a run for its money as well. Actually, this guy, he seems to have pulled a pretty interesting one. He whipped out a grenade, and we all know where this is going. You now see a grenade explode near the dugout opening again. You now see the Ukrainians firing at the dugout. And we can also see something interesting happen right there. So we're going to actually have to stop that video before it shows anything extra. Still a very interesting one to see, and it does show that the Ukrainian counterattack is still going on as strong as normal. And so with that, that is the end of the Kherson area news. We do not know of the advances that the Ukrainians have made today in this area. And of course, due to operational security issues, specifically in this area, we are not reporting on any Ukrainian advances unless if they come from an official government report. Much like the, the land and ground that's been taken up here in the northeastern area, mostly is confirmed by the government through videos that are published by them. With that, we're now going to be moving up to the area of Vavna, where we saw that Russian missiles once again were hitting what we can assume was most likely some kind of a power plant or electrical grid in the area.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's pretty nasty. Hopefully it didn't take out any civilians, and hopefully, if anything, it only caused damage to the electrical grid, which can be repaired. With that, that's the end of that video, and we're now going to be moving on down to the area of the Black Sea, where we saw that a Russian submarine close to the coast was launching off caliber cruise missiles deep inside of Ukrainian territory. Of course, Starsky told us that about 9 out of the 12 that were fired into Ukrainian territory were shot down, and so we can assume that most of these did not make it to their target. With that, here's the video. Also, we can hear some music that's probably copyrighted. You can now see the cruise missiles on their way. And of course, a large majority of them will be shot down, most likely. With that, that is the end of the video, and that is the end of all of our news from around Ukraine today. And so with that, we're now going to be moving north to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelenskyy, and we are only $3,000 away from the $20,000 goal at $17,000. Once again, I just want to reiterate, at this point, with $2,500 left, let me do the math on that real quick. 2,500 divided by 5, 500 of y'all could throw in a $5 donation, and that will get us over the $20,000 goal at this point. And so I highly suggest that you do support the fundraiser. It is operated through the YouTube Give system, so 100% of your donation will go to the nonprofit that's been selected. And also, it helps out Ukrainian soldiers once this war ends to get back to a normal life, and a very good one at that. And so with that, here is the speech from President Zelenskyy on day 201 of the war. And kind of a lengthy one, so here we have it.
Дорогі українські народи, сьогодні 200 днів нашого спротиву, нашої боротьби, нашої вітчизняної війни за волю, за незалежність, за право бути. У ці 200 днів нам чимало вдалося, але найважливіше, а тому найважче попереду. І це звернення я хочу присвятити саме тим, хто попереду, і кому зараз найважче, бо вони роблять найважливіше. Це всі захисники і захисниці України, всі, хто мужньо стоїть 200 днів. А тому стоїть і Україна. Сильні, а тому ми вільні, незламні, а тому ми незалежні. Наші бійці, які героїчно стримали ворога, а тепер не стримують себе. І женуть окупанта на півночі, півдні і сході. На усіх напрямках, але рухаючись лише за одним – вперед і до перемоги. 200 днів українського спротиву, майже 5 тисяч годин. Це майже 300 тисяч хвилин, майже 20 мільйонів секунд і рівно стільки ж причин, щоб всім, завдяки кому це можливо, сказати сьогодні дякую. Мільйони разів, без жодних майже. Сказати, щоб ми віримо в них, віримо в їхню перемогу, без жодних майже. Це всі наші воїни Збройних сил України, сухопутні війська, наша піхота. Ви краще за інших знаєте, на війні мало романтики і багато тяжкої роботи. У ці дні її мужньо і самовіддано виконують наші окремі механізовані бригади. 92-га імені кошового отамана Івана Сірка, 54-та імені гетьмана Івана Мазепи, 14-та імені князя Романа Великого, 60-та окрема піхотна інгулецька бригада. Крок за кроком на Харківщині, Херсонщині, на Донбасі, зброєю, лопатою, руками, зубами ви вигризаєте кожен метр, кожен рубіж, кожне наше місто і село. Це наші танкісти, ті, хто у латних рукавицях кує майбутню перемогу. І сьогодні, у день професійного свята, це 3-я, 4-та, 5-та окремі танкові бригади, танкові полки і батальйони, танкові роти у складі ДШВ, 17-та окрема танкова Криворізька бригада імені Костянтина Пестушка, а особливо 1-ша окрема танкова Сіверська бригада. Всіх вас та усіх причетних я щиро вітаю з Днем танкіста. Це наші ракетні війська та артилерія. Вас по праву кличуть боги війни, Ви відправляєте окупантів на суд Божий, ви відправляєте чортів назад у пекло. Сьогодні це з особливим запалом і вогником у очах робить 406-та окрема артилерійська бригада імені генерал-хорунжого Олексія Алмазова. Ми вдячні її бійцям і загалом усім, кого ми тепло звемо наша арта. Як описати вашу ювелірну роботу двома словами? Влучно і гучно. Ми дякуємо вам за кожне влучно і кожне гучно, за усі знищені ворожі колони, склади, бази і штаби, важливі переправи і мости, там, де палає, вашими зусиллями, і там, де ворог порушив правила пожежної безпеки. У народі і у мережі всі бажають вам точних розрахунків і нових влучань. А окупантам кажуть зрозумілою їм мовою: «Хватит курить, где попало, курите там, где ще не попало». Це наші повітряні сили. Бомбардувальна, штурмова, винищувальна, розвідувальна, військово-транспортна авіація. Захищаючи Україну, ви завжди на висоті. Це наші десантно-штурмові війська. Ви завжди перші, бо ніхто, крім вас. Ці гасла – не просто слова. 8 років і 200 днів ворог це знає. А сьогодні окупанти особливо відчувають силу і міць 79-ї десантно-штурмової бригади, 25-ї та 80-ї повітряно-десантних бригад. Зокрема, у Харківській області, яку ви успішно звільняєте від ворогів. І у Донецькій області, де ви успішно стримуєте ворога. Ми впевнені, і там буде один фінал – ваша перемога. Для цього не треба читати прогнози, достатньо прочитати вашу клятву. Ви десантники Збройних сил України, ви ніколи не приймете поразки, ви ніколи не спасуєте перед труднощами, ви ніколи не залишите в небезпеці бойового товариша. Ви завжди готові знищувати ворогів України в бою. Ви десантники Збройних сил України. Це наші військово-морські сили. Ви довели. Неважливо, який у ворога флот, який у нього флагман, коли на твоєму боці Нептун. Вартові рідних берегів, ракетні катери, артилерійські, мінно-тральні і десантні кораблі, морська авіація, морська артилерія і, звісно, морська піхота. А особливо хочу відзначити 503-й окремий батальйон морської піхоти. На ваших шевронах слова «Якщо наступ, то ми». У наших серцях слова «Якщо ви, то успіх і перемога». Це сили протиповітряної оборони України, зенітні, ракетні війська, радіотехнічні війська, ППО сухопутних і військово-морських сил. Ви чуєте сигнал повітряної тривоги інакше, ніж більшість. Більшість спускається в укриття. Ви ж направляєте погляд вгору, щоб нищити ворожі ракети, літаки, вертольоти, безпілотники. Це наша розвідка. Зі зрозумілих причин дуже мало людей знає ваші імена, ваші обличчя. Про ваші операції зазвичай не пишуть в новинах, але точно напишуть у підручниках військової науки. Ваші успіхи часто не гучні і непомітні для нашого народу, але завжди болючі та відчутні для нашого ворога. Цими днями особливо себе проявляють воїни-розвідники 131-го окремого розвідувального батальйону військової розвідки України. Ті, хто завжди попереду. Я дякую вам. Дякую усім підрозділам Головного управління розвідки та усім нашим розвідникам, завдяки яким ми завжди бачимо, завжди чуємо, завжди знаємо, завжди діємо. І точно переможемо. Це наші спецпризначенці, сили спеціальних операцій, ті, хто йде на «ви», ті, хто переважає не у кількості, а у якості, ті, хто має спеціальну силу для боротьби на межі можливого і неможливого. Це сили територіальної оборони, а особливо відзначаємо бійців окремої 115-ї і 117-ї бригад тероборони. Це медичні війська, які рятують життя наших бійців. Це військове духовенство, капелани, які моляться за життя наших воїнів. Це наші інженери, зв'язківці, кіберармія. Це ті, хто 8 років, 200 днів і зараз боронить і служить державі пліч-опліч із Збройними силами України. Я дякую усім бійцям Національної гвардії, її спецпризначенцям, зокрема 15-му Слов'янському полку. Дякую усім нашим прикордонникам, офіцерам і співробітникам Служби безпеки України, Національної поліції, ДСНС, нашим пожежникам, рятівникам, саперам, а разом всім нашим воїнам, захисникам, кращим синам і донькам України, які сьогодні звільняють її північ, південь та схід. Всім, хто за 200 днів знищив більше 2000 ворожих танків, 4500 бойових броньованих машин, понад 1000 ворожих артилерійських систем, 250 літаків та 200 гелікоптерів і майже 1000 безпілотників окупанта, 15 кораблів та катерів, тисячі інших одиниць ворожої техніки. Звільнив сотні наших міст та сіл. Хто зламав плани ворога, бо не зламався сам. Всі, хто тримав оборону і захистив Київ, зберіг нашу столицю, а отже зберіг нашу віру у нашу перемогу. Всі, хто її зміцнив і примножив, захистивши Харків, Миколаїв, Чернігів, Одесу, Запоріжжя, Дніпро. Всі, хто захищав Маріуполь і Азовсталь, звільняв Київщину, Житомирщину, Чернігівщину, Сумщину, Бучу, Ірпінь, Бородянку, Ворзель, Гостомель, Макарів, Охтирку, Суми, а зараз Балаклію, Ізюм, Куп'янськ. Всі, хто визволяв, визволяє і визволить всі тимчасово окуповані території України, знову принесе життя і український прапор в Херсон, Бердянськ, Мелітополь, в Луганськ, в Горлівку, Єнакієво, Маріуполь та Донецьк, Ялту, Джанкой, Керч, Євпаторію, Сімферополь. Хто всі ці 200 днів викладається на 200%. Ворог казав, що заблукав, що їхав на навчання. Ви навчили їх багато чому. Вмінню швидко збиратись і забирати з наших земель, і розумінню, що кинувши техніку і зброю, це можна зробити значно швидше і легше. Багато хто назавжди вивчив, що правильно казати не на Україні, а в Україні. Це всі, хто ступив на нашу землю і залишився в ній. Багато хто назавжди запам'ятає, що чекає в Україні всіх непроханих гостей. Це наші воїни. Сьогодні ваші дії на півночі, півдні і сході України бачать і відзначають всі. Світ в захваті, ворог в паніці. Україна пишається вами, вірить у вас, молиться за вас, чекає на вас. Це непростий шлях до перемоги, але ми певні, він вам до снаги. Ви вийдете на наш кордон, на всі його ділянки, побачите наші рубежі та ворожі спини. Побачите, як сяють очі наших людей та п'яти окупанта. Вони назвуть це жестами доброї волі. Ми назвемо це перемогою. Ми віримо у вас, в тих, хто всі ці 200 днів у мінус 15 чи плюс 35, у другій ночі чи 6 ранку, звичайного понеділка чи в День Незалежності, попри втому, напругу, небезпеку, робить свою справу, ризикує своїм життям, захищає свою країну. Всі, хто точно був готовий, хто не зважає на чутки і плітки, не читає фейки в інтернеті, а пише історію в реальному житті. Історію незалежності, історію перемоги, історію України. Наші воїни, наші бійці, наші захисники. Для нас точно перша армія світу. Слава вам! Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy, rounding out day 201 of the news. And of course, I thank everyone so much for watching this news segment. If you have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe because we are getting incredibly close to 100,000 subscribers, which is pretty neat. Also, we are only a couple of $100 away. We are less than $300 away from reaching the $20,000 goal, and I'm wondering, can we reach that within the next few minutes? The Lee Spring Army has been able to do the impossible over and over again. And right now, we need to have a special fundraising operation to get that remaining less than $300 in the next few minutes. And so with that in mind, we're going to be moving on to answer questions for the rest of the night. We'll most likely be here for another 20 to 30 minutes, and we're going to try and get as many of y'all's questions to Operator Starsky as possible since he's here. And so with that, what do we got with the polls, the fundraiser, and the questions, Matthew?
All right, folks. So this is the final question segment of the stream, as most of you know, unless you're new. So now we're going to go through our fundraiser. We're going to answer all of the live chat questions that we can get to, as well as the polls. So we're currently sitting at $19,777 on the fundraiser. And our top donors for the moment are Fraser Skoromarsky, who puts in a $700 donation.
We did it!
Very generous.
We did it!
Huge donation.
We reached 20,000! We've done it!
Yeah!
And thank you so much to everyone, so much for y'all's support. We have reached $20,000 on the fundraiser for Razom for Ukraine. We've done it again. We've blown through not only the first goal, but the second one. I thank the entire Lee Spring Army once again so much for y'all's support and helping us to get through this over and over again and raise so much support to help out the soldiers of Ukraine. And so with that, we're going to hand it back over to Matthew so that way he can continue on recognizing our top donors that have made this possible tonight.
All right, so back to Fraser's $700 donation. Fraser, thank you very much for that. That is very generous. And we also have a $400 donation from Running Bear, as well as a $200 donation from Misk77. Those are the top donors for the moment. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything about those?
Yes, I would. I would like to thank each and every one of y'all so much for helping out Ukraine and helping to keep on getting support to them even during the times that things are going incredibly well. We've supported Ukraine through thick and thin, through good and bad, and it's good to know that we are still able to help out Ukraine in massive ways, even to this day. And hopefully until the very end of this war, which will most likely be coming soon. And so with that, I hope that does address everyone's support incredibly well. And with that, we are now going to move on to the poll, so that way we can have Operator Starsky hopefully do something, because we haven't been able to do much tonight. So with that, on to the polls.
Not to the polls just yet. We still have a few more top donors to get to. We have several $100 donations. We have one from Jaroslav, Anatoly Urima, BC Skyman, another one from BC Skyman, as well as Fred Pinchuk, David Krepp, James Pro 95 puts in a $50 donation, and then we have several of those from Retail Mix USA, Steve I, Boston Dan, Andrew Coster, Nicholas Conder, and Trolling Them Softly. And those are all of our top donors for the moment. And thank you to the entire LSA for once again coming through and helping to hit that $20,000 goal. Big thanks to you all, and it is absolutely tremendous that we have raised a whopping $20,000. Folks, just take a moment to recognize that is a ton of money to raise on one YouTube channel in one night. Huge thanks to you all.
And also, once again, to double down on that, I don't know if Starsky knows this, but a decent Lada costs around $15,000. So we've been able to buy a Lada tonight, a white Lada, and also have $5,000 to spare. So pretty cool all around.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so with that, we're now going to move on to the polls.
All right, folks, and moving on to our polls, I think these were pretty good ones, and we had some pretty interesting results off of these. The first one said, if you were the leader of Ukraine, what would be your main concern about the war right now? And folks, I'm going to say up front that I know that Operator Starsky may or may not be able to comment on the results of this one because of the protocol in the military. However, here are the results. 45% said maintaining the counteroffensive should be the main concern. 33% said maintaining international support. 17% said the potential use of WMDs, and 5% said none of the above. Now, for me, I would personally be very concerned about the potential use of WMDs, but that appears to be one of the more unpopular options in the poll, as most of you went with maintaining the counteroffensive. But Enforcer and also Operator Starsky, what are your thoughts?
I'm actually going to let Operator Starsky take a crack at that first.
I think every point is important. I cannot say that international support is more important than maintaining counteroffensive because, like, it doesn't work this way. Everything is important. So, and we gotta say that, for example, our president does a very nice job in those both directions. Let's call it this way. So nothing but respect.
Honestly, I would actually have to agree with that by and large. Everything is pretty much important once it comes out of the wash. And so with that, we are on to the next poll, and I hope we were able to address that one fairly well.
All right, and the next poll said, without the strategic use of social media and internet campaigns, would Ukraine still have success? It looks like 50% said yes, Ukraine would still succeed, 36% said somewhat, it plays a small part, and 15% said no, without it, they would fail. Now, for me on this one, I would fall within the 36% that said somewhat, it plays a small part, because without social media and internet campaigns, it's very hard to really grasp the international audience, to put pressure on their government, such as here in the United States, to send support over to Ukraine, because we get to see the war firsthand and all of its ugliness. But Enforcer and Operator Starsky, what are your thoughts?
I'm actually going to hand this one over to Starsky again to start off.
I think we would most probably fail big time in terms of international support again, because the Russian main weapon is propaganda, as we all know it, and without fighting it, we'd probably end up like Chechnya or something like that. So it gave us opportunity to show all those videos and all that footage from the front lines, because without being active in social media, the world would only see Russian propaganda and their claims that, you know, Ukraine is collapsing, it will fall in 3 days, and stuff like that. But we really see is tons of footage from Ukrainian front lines with burning Russian tanks, and I think that pretty much answers your question, in my opinion.
And I would actually have to largely agree with that one too, to once again ride on Starsky's answers coattails. The social media has influenced foreign support a lot, because we've actually been able to see the Ukrainian side of the story instead of just the Russian side of the story. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And we are now on to the questions, I believe.
Yes, we are. And the first question is from BC Skyman, who says, Matt, has Operator Starsky seen the new rotating drones from Taiwan in action?
Actually, I haven't seen them yet. Let's wait for new footage from the front lines. I think that we will see them very, very soon.
And so with that, I hope that answers your question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Richard Parnell, who says, can y'all please ask Operator Starsky, what is the state of the Ukraine arms industry? Are they still manufacturing, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So, for example, Russians. So, the main narrative that is widely spread at this point, actually, what I saw personally, is that Ukrainian counteroffensive is pointless because Russia controls the most industrially advanced regions of Ukraine. Meaning like Donbass and Crimea. So the Donbass was the only region in Ukraine, and it was like always. Not since 2014, it was like always like that. It was the only region in Ukraine that was receiving most of Ukrainian budget donations for development. Because it was so much underdeveloped, and basically there's just mines in Donbass. Donbass is known for its coal mines. There was also a bullet factory in Luhansk that was removed and disassembled and transferred to Russia, I think in 2014, as well as majority of those plants and factories. The reality is that the tank factories are located on the controlled territory of Ukraine, like the tank factory in Kiev, Zhytomyr, and Lviv. And those are functioning. They still work. There's plenty of other facilities, and pretty much what we lack at this point is, what we lacked until this invasion was 5.45 millimeter rounds for AK-74 and 7.62 millimeter rounds for AKMs and stuff like that. Those were mostly produced in Luhansk, but again, that factory was disassembled and relocated to Russia completely. And it was like 8 years ago. But currently, with the supplies that we receive from our colleagues, from our partners and friends, bullets are not an issue anymore. And specifically, if you saw the videos from our counteroffensive when we were acquiring lots of new ammunition and tanks and vehicles, that's not going to be an issue anytime soon. So we keep producing our weapons and tanks, but at the same time we receive plenty of support from our allies.
And so, I hope that answers your question. That was actually a pretty thorough one at that. I don't think there's anything I can add to it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Mick Ranger, who says, Operator Starsky, how important was the latest push for Ukrainian forces? Do you think that this push will be the deciding factor for the outcome of the war?
I think we see only the beginning of changes on the front lines. So I think that it's just the turning point, and we will see the results probably in October, November. I think that I cannot tell you that we will specifically win this war until December, but I think that we will see a lot of success around October and November as soon as new weapons and vehicles reach our front lines.
So with that, I hope that answers your question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Olam Drab, who says, why do Russian politics shows normally look like game show sets? And yes, we've noticed that as well. It's like they model them after Family Feud or something. It's kind of fitting considering how much of a joke their shows actually are. But what are y'all's thoughts?
Honestly, I wouldn't know why they've organized them like that. It's so freaking weird when you look at it, because you can never shake the vibe that it's a game show more so than the news or a talk show or anything like that, because it's set up like that. Especially really high-pitched whiny men, who always dresses up like he's Steven Seagal wannabe. His stuff is always set up like a game show. There's like 3 people on one side, 3 people on the other, and he stands in between them. It's the weirdest setup. I don't know why they did it, but maybe that appeals to the Russians in some way. Maybe they're huge Family Feud fans. I don't really know. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Starsky real quick so he can take a crack at it.
So this is the way they basically teach their viewers on how to react. There's like there's like a guy who says something that majority of those participants of the show don't agree with, and they start like blaming him and stuff, and the viewer goes like, oh yeah, they're right, they have a point. So yeah, they basically say, "You see this bastard? We gotta blame him for everything," and the viewers. So this is how it works.
And I'm going to say something on that as well. You actually see that on American news channels as well, specifically CNN and Fox. They will do the exact same thing. They will put like the opposer in the midst of people that all share the same opinion, and then they'll just load on that person and attack them for their views. And it definitely appears to be set up by the news channel. So that's kind of interesting that Russia and our country kind of have the same thing going with that.
Yeah, that is an interesting point because, interestingly enough, it is done different ways here in America. Speaking about Fox and CNN specifically, the Russians set it up like a game show, but Fox will set it up where there's multiple displays. Well, I guess you could say screens on the screen showing different people in each one, and then they get in a battle across that. On CNN, I think, out of the two, out of Fox and CNN, CNN is about the closest it gets to the Russian format because they don't lay it out like a game board where there's a couple of people on one side, a couple of people on the other, and someone standing in the middle. But they always have a large table on CNN where they're all sitting, and then they go and, all pick on, the village idiot that's on one end of the table or the other. So it is kind of interesting in that way. It does parallel U.S. news a lot. However, there is a big difference. Fox and CNN are two totally separate ends here in the United States of, I guess you could say, the political spectrum, at least as far as news coverage. Unlike Russia, where there's only one. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just add to this, sorry for interrupting, but on the West, it's a bit different because the outcome of this discussion usually depends on the speaker, and it depends on his speech, on his skills of convincing other people, and that's why it's interesting. That's why some speakers can usually make some really nice comebacks, right? While on the Russian media, it's like a lot of that stuff is like either scripted, like with those guys that we saw, or like there's a victim. They before this invasion, they used to bring like pro-Ukrainian people, even people from Ukraine. They used to invite them to their shows, and they would literally bully them, all during the whole show. So it's a bit different, actually.
And it's
and Enforcer, real quick, I do want to make a distinction just to clarify what I said a little bit. Over here in America, the news shows will do that basically to entice viewers to keep watching. And the distinction in Russia is they're doing that to brainwash people. So it's a little bit of a different motivation, but I think it's pretty similar, but different reasons for doing so.
And also, yes, I was actually about to get to that point right there at the end. I was about to say there is a huge difference in that in America, these kinds of setups on news are being done to keep up viewership, to keep up ratings, and therefore to keep up expensive ad space, because that's how the news makes their money on TV, is through the ads that they run. And then, of course, in Russia, there's really no incentive there to do it for the viewers. It's more so to do it for the government, so that way you don't get your head chopped off doing it. So with that, I hope we've addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Hans von Klingser, who says, Enforcer Starsky, I like that. He says, how long before we see cross-border raids with Ukrainian tractors towing back half of the Russian Air Force jets?
It's a nice question. Well, I think that it's pretty much possible, but the problem is that usually not much left of Russian jets when they land in Ukraine, for example. I can tell because I saw them.
Interesting. So with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And also, real quick, I have to make a little bit of a comment here. I would ask that no one talks about politics. The only reason we brought up Fox and CNN, we made equal critiques on both of them, was to talk about how there is a little bit of a similarity in between them and Russian news, although the similarity is only surface level. So if y'all could please refrain from talking about American politics, because I've already seen literally both ends. Someone says there, CNN is garbage and Fox is real news, and then I've seen the actual opposite of that too. And I know that that's where that's going, so just ask if y'all can stop that right here, because that wasn't really the point of us bringing that up.
It's like, what I see a lot in the commentaries is that there is also propaganda on the West. I mean, guys, you didn't live in Russia. You don't know how they do that. What is on the West is nothing like propaganda. It's like children games, guys, propaganda can only exist in a country ruled by the same person for like 20 years. That's propaganda. There's nothing like that on the West, believe me, because I can compare.
And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Masha C, who says, question to Operator Starsky, do you think it makes sense for Ukrainians to go toward Moscow, or should we stay in a defensive war?
Well, again, it's a different thing. We are not advancing against Russia because it requires us to have like 3 times bigger army than they have, at least, if we don't want to end up like Russian army in Ukraine. So our main task is to liberate our own territories. We respect international legislations and borders, I mean, and we have our land to defend. We don't need other land, specifically Russian, because,
And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one. Also, we'll be answering questions for about the next 9 minutes, and then we'll have reached the top of the hour, and we will be ending the stream then. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, I want to give a special shout out to our Discord mod, Susie Halsey. She does really good work for us over there on the Discord, and she wanted me to say that she would like to personally thank you, Operator Starsky, for giving up your valuable time to spend with us this afternoon on the stream. And also, I want to second that as well, and thank you for stopping by.
And I'll triple it.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
No problem at all. Also, just to tell you all the story of how this happened, I called Starsky on the phone like 9 minutes before this started. He was like, hey, what's up, man? I was like, hey, you want to come on the stream? He's like, I just woke up. I was like, that's fine. I was like, you just get some coffee. And so, fortunately, he hopped on, which was very nice of him. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Carta, who says, can Operator Starsky confirm the rank of that captured Russian commander that we saw a few days ago?
So there's like different opinions on that. Like on one hand, we can see that this guy is pretty much similar to the general, Sychevoy. But on the other hand, like the information that we keep receiving is that he is lieutenant colonel. It would be a big sensation in Ukraine if had we capture a Russian general. So until it's not confirmed, I would stick to the version that it's a lieutenant colonel who is very, very similar to General Sychevoy.
I would also have to largely agree with that. We did see it was a lieutenant colonel, but I would like to stay optimistic and hope that it was a lieutenant general. But then again, the rank was a lieutenant colonel that was on the epaulette, so it's most likely just a lieutenant colonel that has a striking similarity to the lieutenant general. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, real quick, a big shout out to GF Logo for putting in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. Thank you very much for that. And we're currently sitting at $20,284, so doing pretty good. But up next, we have a question from Greaser Bub, the original. who says, I have a question for all of you guys. Do you think that if Putin is pressed any further and Russia continues to falter, that he may use weapons of mass destruction? And for my part on that, I'll say that Starsky is probably much more qualified to answer because he's on the ground and knows the actual situation. But from my sort of like third person perspective, I would take a stab and say that the risk is pretty high. But I'm going to leave that up to Operator Starsky to answer.
I think that Putin was informed early when this invasion started that NATO will bring its troops into Ukraine if the weapons of mass destruction are used. So I don't think that he will do that. And by the way, the Soviet Union lost to Afghani during the Afghanistan war that lasted for like 10 years. And they never used weapons of mass destruction there, except for like some chemical stuff.
Now that...
But
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. No, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't think that they will use nuclear weapons. There were messages and there was information that they were preparing some kind of gas to be used specifically on the front lines. There were also messages that they used something. We don't have confirmation of that yet, but we have confirmation, and it was also confirmed by Bellingcat investigators that Russian officers received antidotes from chemical weapons, specifically neurotic oh my god, I don't know how to say it in English, but chemical weapons that they obviously planned to use on the front lines, specifically in the areas of Rubizhny and Severodonetsk.
And also, I actually have to double down on that one with Operator Starsky. Historically, there is never an instance where a nuclear power has lost a war against a smaller nation in a conventional war and then used weapons of mass destruction against them. There was the suggestion, like Starsky said, that earlier on in the war, the Russians may have been preparing to use chemical weapons, but that never panned out. And also, historically, the use of nuclear weapons on a smaller country when losing a war against them has never really happened either. But once again, it is all just opinions on a hypothetical situation. Matthew could be right, Operator Starsky could be right, or we could be wrong. There's really no way to know, but that is what I'm standing by now, is that the Russians most likely would not use weapons of mass destruction. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Duncan VR, and he leaves out the sheep noises tonight. Duncan, I love it. He says, question, do you think it is likely that Ukraine can take back Crimea?
I think it is, but again, in order to take Crimea, we gotta get rid of Russian fleet in the Black Sea, because Russian fleet can provide quite a support to Russian troops, and we gotta consider this factor. But I think that it's like everything is possible because it's Ukraine. Come on.
I like the enthusiasm there, and also, if I had to take a shot at the answer, I would say most likely. I think that the Ukrainian progress in the Northeast has been incredibly swift, and we may see massive changes still occurring there within the next few months before the end of this year. But I do believe that taking Crimea may take some time longer. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from James Navarro, who says, a question for Enforcer. All them dumped tanks, are you sure that they aren't tracked so that when the Russians leave them behind, they can see exactly where the Ukrainians are?
No, they're not tracked. The Russians have been abandoning tanks in large numbers since the very beginning of this war, and from what we have seen and what we've known, none of them have had trackers put onto them. Also, it seems very cost inefficient to try and put a tracker onto a tank and then find out where the Ukrainians are. The Russians do have military satellites, much like the United States, and they can photograph large swaths of Ukraine and see exactly where Ukrainian soldiers are through those satellites. They could also use drones to find them, and many other methods that would be far more cost efficient and affordable than giving up a $3.5 million tank with a tracker attached and then having to chase it down and trying to destroy the Ukrainians and that $3.5 million tank with additional artillery shells and ammunition that would cost who knows how much at that point. So with that, I hope that answers a question on my end, but I'll actually hand it over to Starsky because he may have some information that the Russians are using trackers or not that I don't know about.
I agree on that. It's pointless because they have like satellites and reconnaissance aircraft and stuff like that. So they don't really need to put those trackers specifically because GPS trackers are were used in their missiles, and they don't have enough of them at this point because nobody sells them those. And that's one of the reasons why they don't build as much new missiles as before.
And so with that, I hope that answers the question from both of us. And we have 1 minute left until the stream ends and the fundraiser as well. And so with that, we're going to answer one final question from the live chat. And who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question?
And before I get to that one, big shout out to Michael Grobman for putting in a $50 donation. I think he's going to be the last call out of the night until we end the stream after this last question. So the last question goes to Sean Edwards, who says, Enforcer, question for Starsky. Should the U.S. impose secondary sanctions on countries like India that continue to support Russia?
Oh yeah, I forgot that's the one for Starsky. I'll let him answer that.
I cannot answer this question because I'm a military. I'm not a politician. I think that probably Enforcer, as a representative of the United States, can answer this better than me.
Oh man, putting me up on a pedestal. But to answer that question, I do not believe that sanctioning India or Pakistan or any of the neutral countries is a viable option. By sanctioning them, we throw them towards the Russian camp automatically because they'll become far more economically tied to them and China. One thing that the United States always has to leverage is our economic ability and our economic power. And so while the Indians and the Pakistanis are not directly allied with us and what we are trying to do, they are still fledgling economies that are starting to grow and starting to emerge as somewhat powerful. And because of that reason, we want to make sure to have as little economic barriers in between them and us, so that way they start to become more economically tied to the United States, and therefore their decisions will be more so tied to what we're doing, because they will not want to miff us and then suffer the consequences. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. Once again, that's just in my opinion, take it with a grain of salt. But with that, I hope I've been able to answer that last question of the night fairly well, and it is the end of tonight's stream and tonight's fundraiser. Just a second ago, the fundraiser came to the close with an impressive whopping total of $20,394.00, which is one of the first times I've seen that. That's actually a round cent number. So with that, the Lee Spring Army has blown through the $10,000 and $20,000 goal and perched itself nicely just $394 over our final goal. And it's impressive to think that on day 201, watching the Ukrainians obliterate the Russians across the northeastern area of the country, well, the northeast area of the front in the eastern side of the country, and also see us obliterate a fundraiser, that we've been able to end this day so well. Of course, it's been a pleasure to have you on, Operator Starsky. I hope you've enjoyed being on tonight's stream and answering a lot of questions, because I know that they've appreciated that a massive load.
Thank you so much. Thank you for invitation, and thank you for your questions. Leaf Spring Army is awesome.
Yeah! And so with that, we are going to round out tonight's stream, and I'm going to leave y'all to listen to the Anthem of Ukraine as we close off tonight's stream. If you have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We are getting incredibly close. Let me actually check real quick. We are at 99,360 subscribers right now, and we are only about, let's see, 640 away from 100,000 subscribers. And so if you could subscribe, it will help us to get towards that goal a little bit quicker. Thank you all so much once again for watching. Stay safe, have a great night, and I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover day 202 and 203 of the war in Ukraine. Have a great night, and take care.